I'm joined today by Kelly Meggs, one of the Oath Keeper leaders from Florida. Um, I'm joined by him today so we can go through his story about what it was like uh, in captivity, what it was like the day of January 6th, and really just to cut through a lot of the nonsense that's been said about him, to cut through the narratives. So, Kelly, thank you for joining me. The first thing I'd like to do is really, dissect who you really are as a man. The Oath Keepers, I think, even more than the Proud Boys, were really mischaracterized and turned into a punching bag for a narrative. So I'd like, if you would, I'd like you to tell those listening a little bit about who you are, who's the real Kelly Meggs versus the seditionist caricature they portrayed you as.
And they've done a good job of that for the last 4 years, that's for sure. But my name is Kelly Meggs. I'm 56 years old. I live in Ocala, in beautiful Florida. Really, we moved here from South Florida, just trying to get away from a lot of the congestion and stuff like that, so that we could have room to grow our family. We moved here it's been about 18 years now. We've lived up here. So I'm married to my wife Connie. We've been married for 26 years. Got my son Zach, my daughter Danielle, my grandkids all live here on the farm. Really, I basically was just somebody that worked and went back and forth to work every day. I managed car dealerships. I've been in sales my whole life since I was 19. And it's just something I love doing. So it's basically, as far as it goes, my life was just my job. I wasn't really super into politics. I was a Bush supporter back in the Bush Gore days, which I regret at this point greatly, and I think most of us do. And then when things started heating up, I knew that I did not support Hillary in any way, shape, or form, and I liked the fact I did vote for Ross Perot back in the day because I thought a businessman would be the best choice to run the country. Historically, those have always done better than the other ones who are tied into the military-industrial complex and stuff. So politically, as far as being a big Trump supporter, when he came on the scene, I'm like, okay, that's my guy. You know what I mean? I wanted a businessman to be running the country because I think they have, the knowledge and skills not only to negotiate deals and to work out, situations around the globe, but also to manage the finances of the country. I mean, the financial aspect, as we're seeing right now with Elon Musk, are insane of what's going on. So it's just nice to have somebody at the helm that has that power. But during his time in office, especially towards the end, just kind of moving towards the January 6th thing, is towards the end of his time in office, there was a lot of springing up riots and cities burning across the country, as we all know. And I just kind of got in a situation where it's like, man, these people are marching on all these towns and this different thing. And, when is it? It's going to be a matter of time before they come to our neck of the woods and what's going to happen. So I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and he's like, look, maybe you should join the Oath Keepers. And, instead of talking about it all the time, maybe you could do something about it and maybe help stop some of the burning down and things like that. And so that's kind of the reason I reached out initially to join the Oath Keepers. I had a friend of mine wanted to go to a Trump rally that they were putting on in our town square at the same day. They were doing one of their BLM rallies, and he said something to me on Facebook, and I messaged him back, yeah, I'll drive, no problem. And then he made a comment about bringing a gun. I didn't even acknowledge the comment, but it blew up all over the internet. And the next thing I know, they're calling my dealership, they're calling my house, they're putting pictures of my grandkids up on the internet. It blew up out of control instantly. The doxing was amazing to me, how fast and furious it happened. So that right there made me say, okay, I'm going to pick up the phone, I'm going to call these guys and say, look, what's going on? You know what I mean? And when I actually reached out to the Oath Keepers here in Florida, it was not a very well organized organization. I cannot say that in the least. So I don't know if you have any questions about that so far.
Yeah, I mean, so like I think this is a good bridge to, and just to recap on what I've heard from the past, Jessica Watkins, she had done similar things in Ohio where, Jess was trying to help. Like, I mean, it didn't matter who it was, BLM, whoever, she was there to protect and to serve, Kenny, Ken, he got into the Oath Keepers, I recall, because he wanted to help with disaster relief, and
Yep.
so for the Oath Keepers, it seemed to me, the Proud Boys might have been like some sort of some a group of people who wanted to fight Antifa, or they wanted to be like a drinking fraternity, whatever you want to call it. But the Oath Keepers seem to be explicitly about public service, former veterans, EMTs, and people who generally just wanted to step up for the community. They were not. They were framed as sort of like these anti-government militia fanatics, but in reality, they couldn't be further from the truth. They were there to support local government and keep order in society. So if you could take us, this seems like a good bridge to the motivation of being in DC in the first place. I know you were there for security, but if you want to, get into this bridge of, the motivation of the Oath Keepers and your motivation for getting involved with them was really to protect society. It was not to topple it, right?
No, not at all. I mean, initially when I joined, it was because number one, the massive doxing online. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I had that night after that event happened online. I had a 3500 diesel truck with a giant light bar in the front. And I sat that truck in the front yard running all night long with the lights on, flashing out towards the road because I was afraid someone was going to come to my house. I really was. It gets to a point where you don't know. They're putting pictures of your grandkids online. They're putting pictures of your children online. It's crazy. So I was like, okay, people should not have to endure this just because they said they wanted to go to a Trump rally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Regardless of what anybody else said, no one did anything out of line. So I said, hey, I've got to do something about this. And I can either sit here on the couch and bitch about it, like 99% of the Americans, or I can do something about it and try to help. And my try to help, now I had done a tremendous amount of disaster relief. And honestly, that's what pulled me towards the Oath Keepers as well, just like Ken Harrelson was. When I did research online, first of all, the first couple articles online, anytime you see them, you just throw those away because those are not real anyway. But then I started searching through some of their older pictures and things like that, and they've done a lot of disaster relief in Houston. They had pictures of them with the mayor of Houston. It was a black gentleman. He was loving the fact that they were there protecting the food storage. They had a food storage warehouse, and they were afraid that they were going to break into it, so they asked them to guard the warehouse. So that's what they did. They protected it from people coming in and stealing. So when I started seeing that background with the Oath Keepers, it tied into a lot of the relief efforts I had been doing prior to that. I did a tremendous amount of relief with the Bahamas and all the hurricanes we have here in Florida. So, but typically all of my volunteer work that way was done through work. But I saw a good tie-in between the two aspects of it. It wasn't just a security aspect. It was also the disaster relief. But the security aspect of the Oath Keepers ratcheted up during the summer of 2020 when all the violence broke out across the country. And I remember when I first joined, there was only 5 members that were active. Now, we had 50,000 members registered, but the activity level of those people, being involved, being on calls, actually plugging in, as we like to call it, and getting involved in what's going on, was such a small number. There was only 5 of us on the first call for that year, and this was in 2020. So it was pretty much like, boy, we waited way too long to get organized if we're actually going to think we're going to stop someone from burning down our country. So the first call was had, and we all spoke. There was a gentleman named Mike. He was in charge of the state of Florida. They called him point of contacts. We all called him the leader of Florida. That's basically how we did it, Florida lead. So I spoke to him, and I told him, you got Kenny, badass Army guy. He knows everything he needs to know. We had another guy who had trained in the Israeli Army and also in the United States Army, so he knew what he was doing. We had a couple other people that were police officers, and ultimately, in the end, I'm sitting here like, okay, I'm a patriot. You know what I mean? I haven't served in the military, but I'm willing to stand up if that time comes. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is the call. You know what I mean? They're burning our country down. So I decided to go ahead and sign up, talk to them, and we had a little bit of an event going on in Louisville a couple months later. We had kind of called and organized, and we got to be at about, I guess we were probably in the 40 to 60 member range that were actively on the calls each week now, because people saw what was happening, and they were like, wait, we better get back involved and plug back in. So membership was on the rise. We had 40 or 50 people signed up, and the call came out for Louisville. And Louisville was basically when the Breonna Taylor murder case, the verdict was going to be coming out. You had the NFAC, which is the Not Effing Around Coalition. It's a 3,000 member militia out of Georgia, ran by Grandmaster Jay. Grandmaster Jay, not only was he part of the 80s rap scene, but he also ran for president at one point in time, had decided that he was going to put together a 3,000-man black militia, and that they were going to basically govern through their presence. And we watched them quite a bit just to see what their activities were. They really were no threat. He wasn't crazy, even though everybody thought he was. We knew that. We knew he wasn't going to attack a city or do anything stupid. So we kind of just watched him at a distance. But he had threatened that when the Louisville verdict came out in the Breonna Taylor case, that they were going to burn down the city of Louisville. And that was what they had proclaimed online. And it was multiple places. You had the BLM protesters there, the Antifa faction there, as well as the NFAC, saying that if they don't get the verdict they want, they're going to burn down Louisville. So the national call went out, hey, we need to go to Louisville. We had a pawn shop that had 2 locations, as well as a Shell gas station that gave us the Shell gas station was the one that actually reached out to us first, because they had a situation where an employee was working and they were getting robbed by 2 people. And the cashier behind the counter pulled a gun out and shot one of the guys. So they were being threatened way before the Breonna Taylor verdict was coming out. But the local factions that were against them were saying that this is the time that we're going to go ahead and make this happen. When the Breonna Taylor thing comes out, we're going to burn the city down, but we're definitely going to burn down that gas station. And so she reached out to us. So they literally gave us access to all of their cameras where we could tie into their security system through our intel team, which I was on and part of. And we were actually able to monitor the gas station from, however far we are away, 800 miles away or whatever it is. So we literally had someone watching their gas station 24 hours a day through video, so that we could see anything that looked crazy. And we had people that were in Louisville at the time, Oath Keepers who were there present, who could respond if need be. So that's just something that she had reached out to us, because realistically, if the whole city's burning down, what are the police going to do? I mean, there's only so much they can do. So these individual owners had reached out to us to do security. And one of the things that Stuart was very good at, Stuart was excellent at making sure our presence was 100% legal and 100% wanted. So he always got documents signed by these owners to make sure it was okay that we'd be on their property and that we were able to protect it during these events. So that's something I always did respect about Stuart. Is that he was very careful about making sure everything was done legally. So that was a real basis for my first experience. And let me tell you something. I've never been in a combat zone, but I'll tell you what, man, I tussled with the decision to go to Louisville for probably 4 or 5 days. I mean, at first I'm like, sign me up, I'm going. You know what I mean? And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, man, this is crazy, because we had people around town. One of the things that we had that would work well in these riots and stuff is that they had their own video people walking around live streaming what they were doing. Well, these guys are walking around armed. Kentucky's a constitutional carry state. You can walk around with an AR-15 strapped on your back, AK-47. And we saw plenty of the guys in the crowd walking around with that. And I'm like, well, maybe I better think about this a little bit. You know what I mean? So we had a very serious heart-to-heart in this household and decided that, I was not going to do this because it just wasn't right. And then the next morning I woke up and I looked at my wife and I said, baby, I'm going. I got to go. I can't sit here and not do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she's like, I respect that. So you need to go. And I literally wrote my kids letters like, hey man, this might be the stupidest thing I've ever done. I love you. I hope I'm coming back, but I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm willing to go, So we went up there. It was quite the amazing experience. And I'm going to just sidestep for a second. I don't think any of us disagreed with the fact that the way that went down when those police shot through a closed door was right. It wasn't right. I did not agree in any way, shape, or form with the fact that those police killed that girl through that door. I don't agree with that at all. If you can't see it, you shouldn't be shooting at it. And so I didn't agree with what their verdict was. I didn't agree with the fact that the officers had done something wrong. But that is not an excuse. You can protest all day long. I'll protest with you. You know what I mean? But you can't burn people's property down. You can't do that. And there has to be some level of civil acting when you're out there doing that. So we found really what had happened was that the fact that the BLM movement was in itself a movement, but it had been infiltrated by the Antifa factor, and they utilized that as an opportunity to riot and destroy. So, and there's a lot of different sidebars we could go on with who was funding them and all those different things, but that's not really what we're going to talk about. So, but that's why I got involved with the Louisville. Scariest night of my life. Literally people yelling at you. They see you on the roof. They're going to burn the whole building down with you on it. I mean, it was crazy. But we were up there for 3 days, and then I left. Kenny and some of the other guys stayed up for an extra day, and then they came back. But I can honestly say some of the places got burned. There was some things burned up there. One officer was shot, and while we were there during the riots, and but none of the buildings that we were protecting had any incidents. And you'll hear Stuart Rhodes say it every once in a while. It's not that we use force to prevent these things from happening. Our presence is enough of a deterrent. And that's ultimately what we utilized is, look, we're here. We didn't come prepared to use force, but we will.
Yeah.
And that's enough to make people say, I'm not going to go there. So that was my first experience with the Oath Keepers there, and that's the first time I had done any type of security with them. And it got really heated. There's a good video online about the Oath Keepers and then BLM marching into the parking lot where we were staging. And it was pretty hairy for a minute. I mean, it would have been ugly, let me tell you that. So I'm glad nothing happened there. Everybody remained calm, cool, collective. And it really, on our side, I should say, so nothing sparked off, which definitely would have ended in very bad situation. So we're very happy nothing happened there. But then when we came back, we got a call from Roger Stone. Roger Stone was on the Alex Jones show with Stuart Rhodes, I guess, one time. And Roger Stone was telling Stuart that he was doing some events in Florida and needed some security. So Stuart reached out to me. I connected with Roger Stone, and we did a couple of events with him in Miami and a couple in Tampa. And really fast forward to November when the Million MAGA March was going on, we were asked to come up and do security with Alex Jones' team, moving him around from stage to stage. And realistically, it was me and my wife there, and he hooked up with the other Oath Keepers. We stayed in the town. Everybody else was staying outside. And when they all came the next morning, Alex Jones came out of the hotel. He had like 50, 60 people around him. I'm like, he doesn't need our help. So we just kind of walked around the city. We didn't even really do anything that day. It was pretty boring, actually. But met up with Jess and them. I know you spoke about her earlier. Met up with them at the Supreme Court, talked for probably 15, 20 minutes, and then we went back to the hotel and chilled out a little bit. Antifa did march that night. They threw a fireball into the restaurant of the hotel. But we were already upstairs just relaxing because it had been kind of a long day. So, and then when Trump announced that Jan 6 was coming, Initially, I said, we're not going to Jan 6. I have no interest in going back to Washington. I've got a job. I can't be running around the country all the time for this stuff. I got to focus on my work. And then when Trump came on board and put out his tweet, hey, it's going to be wild, it's going to be wild, Roger Stone contacted me, said he was going to be doing some speaking there, needed a security team. So that's what I put together. That security team was consist of 8 to 10 guys. And we were going to go up on the 5th, pick them up at the airport, basically take them to his hotel, stage 2 guys outside the hotel. We'll rotate those guys on 2-hour shifts. And then the next day, take them around to the different stages. And that was really the plan going forward, and I had it all set up. And then Sunday, right before January 6th, I got a call from the people that were putting on the Stop the Steal rally, and they requested that we do congressional members, they said members and staffers. We thought we were actually moving congressional members from the ellipse at the White House down to the Capitol building. But it turned out it was mostly staffers and VIPs that were going to be speaking at the Capitol, not people speaking at the ellipse. But nonetheless, they asked us to do that. I agreed. I said I could probably put together. They needed 30 people. So I put the call out online, and we got 30 people put together, and we changed our plans around, and I handed off Roger Stone to the team from Alabama. So we went ahead and we started going up on the 5th. And this is one of the big parts of the story they got wrong. We left on the 4th, and we were spending the night at a buddy of mine's place in North Carolina. He's got a big farm there with a shooting range and everything. And our intention was we were going to be going up on the 4th, stopping at his place. All day on the 5th, we had a free day. We weren't going to do anything until that night, and that was just basically driving to D.C., so we were ready to roll. Well, they called us on the 4th and said, look, there's going to be an event at the Supreme Court, and we don't have anybody to do security for the women for Trump at the Supreme Court stage on the 5th. So I said, all right, fine. We'll come up early, or we'll leave really early in the morning. We'll get there. We'll do it. So I had to call the guys as we're traveling now. We've already got all our guns. We've got all our ammunition. We've got everything we were going to use out there shooting on my buddy's farm. And it was like, okay, great. Now we've got to have a place to store this stuff, So that's why we had a hotel rented outside of town. It had nothing to do with ever schlepping guns in through an Uber, because the guy that we left at the hotel stayed at the hotel for a reason. He was 74 years old. He had a hip replacement, and he didn't want to go to town. He's like, I'm not walking around the damn town, so I'll stay here. So I'm like, perfect, you can stay. Had no car, had no vehicle, had no way of getting anything to us. But the entire thing about us having a weapons cache outside of town, ready to roll at a moment's notice and all these things, was all bullshit. And that's something that they made up from the beginning. But as soon as they started flashing those photos, I remember sitting in the cell. I'm going to jump ahead a minute. I remember sitting in the cell when we were in C2B, and Guy Reffitt pounded on the wall yelling at me that I'm on the radio, and they're talking about this cache of weapons that they found that we had stored outside of town ready to be used, So they conflated that story to mean something it never was ever intended to mean. And even in trial, one of the guys testified that he brought his gun because we were going to be shooting on the 5th. It had nothing to do with January 6th.
Right.
So that's pretty much that. So that's pretty much how we got to January 6th. We went up on the 5th, like I said, in the afternoon, and did some security on the Supreme Court stage. Went pretty smoothly, went back to the hotel room, ate a dinner. We were supposed to have a meeting later that night with Ali Alexander and the organizers just to make sure we were all set up. One of the things that I didn't mention is on Monday, after I got that phone call, we were requested by the Secret Service to provide all driver's license and name, email address, all that stuff of everybody coming in our group so that they could get clearance by the Secret Service before being allowed in the area up near the president. So we were cleared by the Secret Service to be there. They knew we were coming. They knew everything. There was no hidden things. And one of the guys, not in my group, but in the organization I think he's from New York actually, who was coming down, actually called the chief of police for D.C. to get a verification to whether or not people that were law enforcement officers that are in our organization were allowed to carry that day. And unfortunately, DC is one of those states that does not allow reciprocation. So they won't even allow Leos to carry there. So there's no Leo carry even in DC.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not like they didn't know we were coming. They knew we were coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we were cleared to come. So when we got there, we checked in, did our thing at the Supreme Court. That night we slept, got up early the next morning, and that's basically how we got there.
Yeah. And even with the, you had mentioned having VIPs, and, part of your role was also going to be, when people did go to the Capitol, they were going to be speaking there. So, I mean, a lot of people kind of aren't familiar with the fact that there were permitted speaking engagements even at the Capitol.
There were multiple speaking engagements, but one of them was supposed to be in Section 8, which is on the east side of the Capitol, which is how we ended up there. I mean, that's the only reason we went there, is because there was supposed to be a stage set up right there, big and bold. And we were supposed to stand around that stage and make sure nobody messed with the speakers on that stage until the Secret Service came when Trump spoke at that stage. That was our exact assignment for that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is a good, this is important information. The others have talked about this as well, but it's important for people to realize, because they portray this as like a giant insurrection monolith. I was just there to hear a Trump speech. I didn't even know there was going to be a protest at the Capitol until they'd said it. You had other people who were there who didn't even go to the Trump speech. They just went right to the Capitol. You had people who were there protesting like COVID lockdowns. There were a whole bunch of reasons people were there that day for, whatever. You guys in particular were there for a job. You were there to protect VIPs and protect speaking engagements and stuff like that. And it doesn't really mesh with the idea of prior planning to topple a government. You guys, to your credit, you did less than even, I think the Proud Boys were misrepresented, but you did even less than them, and you showed up far later. So it's not like you weren't engaged in the breach of the perimeter like some Proud Boys were. Though I'll say even there, what's interesting there is that, and you know this from watching the CCTV, the dome cameras were following the Proud Boys in their little march the whole morning. So it's like neither of your groups were unknown. They were clearly aware of what you guys were doing the whole day. But so with this knowledge, take us through, if you could, from start to finish. January 6th, you're in DC. It's the day of. It's time to do the security job. Take us from the beginning to the end. What actually happens that day, irrespective of the government's fake timeline of the events of that day?
Yeah, well, we basically got up at 5 o'clock in the morning because we were supposed to be at the Ellipse at 6. We got down to the Ellipse about 6:30, and I'll tell you what, I had no clue there was going to be this many people there. There was already a line wrapping the entire area where the Washington Monument is. I couldn't believe it. We were walking around trying to figure out how do we get in this thing, because we couldn't find the gate, and we were just walking all the way. I was like, how many people are here already, And so as we approached the gate, we got up there, we talked to the Secret Service guy who was standing there, and he's like, hang on, let me go get one of the event organizers. And they came over, and they're like, yeah, you guys are supposed to be in here. I'm like, well, there's another car with another group of guys coming, so I need to let them know where to meet us exactly, so give me just a few minutes. And then when the Secret Service guy came over and says, hey, you guys can't take any of your protective gear here. Because we had, let's face it, we all saw the posts online heading into January 6th. The left was posting all over the place. And this is discussed extensively in our One Question Remains books. It's something that Rob and I, Rob Morris, Lego Man, we actually had a conversation about this in my cell playing chess because I was kicking his ass every time. And he's like, how do you do that? And I'm like, man, you got to think ahead. You're not making this move. You're making 2 moves down the road or 3 moves down the road. That's what you're setting up. And that's what had happened. That's why this all unfolded the exact way it was. Why do you think 1 million Trump supporters showed up in D.C. with helmets and vests and freaking flagpoles and mace? or bear spray or whatever the hell they had. Why? Because they had been assaulting our crowd every time we went to D.C. The time before at the Jericho March in December 14th, they stabbed a Proud Boy and put him in the hospital for quite a long time. So the anticipation of violence was massive. And they were provoking it on the other side. They're like, we're all coming. We're busing people in from California. We're going to shut this thing down. And we're like, man, this is going to be a battle royal. This is a big one. This isn't anything to joke about. This is going to be serious.
Yeah.
You know? And that was sold ahead of time.
Well, you even have, I mean, people, it's weird how little interest there actually is in it. But, you know, John Sullivan, they try to like whitewash how much of a provocateur he was, but his entire Discord server has been downloaded. And it's just interesting. Like you see countless Antifa people talking about their prior planning. And a lot of the stuff on Twitter also has been kind of like wiped, but there's still a massive amount of screenshots from that time talking about how they plan to infiltrate the crowds and cause chaos. So it's not like it's not a theory.
No, it was a fact. And then worse than that were the idiots on our side. I can't remember the guy's name, but Sam, what's his name? Sam something. He's on there telling all the Trump supporters to bring their guns. He has a little podcast or radio show that he does, and he's on there. And he's got a pretty big audience, and someone sent me the link to it a couple days before January 6th, and he's telling everybody, bring your guns. This is going to be a Second Amendment march. Everybody have your guns. Everybody have your guns. And I'm like, what in the hell is this guy saying? This is not, no. I'm like, this can't happen. So I sent this around to a couple people, friends of mine, that were going, you know what I mean? Proud Boys, a couple of the guys in the Oath Keepers, and said, nobody's bringing guns, are they? You're not bringing guns. And they're like, no, we're not bringing guns. I'm like, okay, good. At least we know. I'm like, this is insane. This guy's telling everybody to bring guns. I'm like, this is nuts. So we got guys on our side, supposedly, telling everybody to bring guns. So you're thinking, like, this thing is going to be crazy. So when we show up and you tell us we're going to be protecting people, and we know that Antifa is using frozen water bottles, their latest technique is to walk up and spray you with mace in the face and then beat you up. You know what I mean? 5 or 6 of them jump on you. We're going to be prepared for that. That's why you had so many Trump supporters with gas masks. That's why you had so many with body armor, so many with helmets on. It wasn't because we showed up for violence, but that's the narrative that it allowed them to spin because we were trying to protect ourselves. They utilized that for aggression. And they said, this is how their aggression. Just like the crowd. You have one member of the Antifa squad run out and hit a cop. Next thing you know, cops come out and just start hitting everybody. Innocent people standing there doing nothing. So that whole escalation is what happened. That's why the people showed up with the body armor and everything. But anyway, back to the story at the Ellipse. They told us we can't come in with our protective gear, so we've got to leave it outside. So I'm like, no problem, I left it outside. The problem that occurred with that, sitting through the speakers and all this stuff, we had no idea what was going on at the White House, down at the Capitol, because we're all sitting there waiting for Trump to come out and speak, enjoying all the speakers. So it all goes through. Speakers go, Trump does his talk. We get done and we find out as we're standing around waiting for the VIPs to come out for us to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is how we're going to move you. We're going to put you in 2 circles and we're going to take you down. The reason we were doing 2 circles is because a certain portion of the group that had protective gear had to go back outside and get it on. And then we were going to meet the other one as they came by. Well, there was a problem. We got separated in this 1.5 million person crowd. So we actually were now split into 2 groups. Approximately 12 and approximately, 6 or 7, whatever was left in the other group. So we went out, got our gear, and we started walking down towards the Capitol. We had nobody with us. We had no one. I'm trying to reach Kenny or somebody on the phone and say, hey, what's going on? When I finally do, he's like, man, we missed you. We're about halfway there. So I look around the guys. I'm like, guys, we got to go. They're gone already. So we start, hiking through the crowd as fast as we can. And then when we took a different direction than they did. They went straight down. We hooked over to Freedom Plaza. We made a left there and went to Freedom Plaza, where one of the other Oath Keepers had a VIP's mother who couldn't keep up with the crowd and kind of got left behind, and then he went the wrong direction. So we swung over, picked him up, and we started walking her down as a group. So we've got plenty of video of that. But when we arrived at the Capitol, based on the delays and everything, we didn't get on Capitol grounds until 2:30. That's 2 hours after the first breach. But yet we were the leaders and organizers of this whole thing, they say, right?
Right.
So, but when we're walking, you have to understand the setup. The way they did it was, they actually were brilliant in their entrapment. They had an outer, they called it a snow fence, and that was like a plastic barrier that sat around. And then on the walkways, they had the bike racks so that people wouldn't go through the bike racks, which were totally ineffective. Once they're breached, they're thrown to the sides, out of the sidewalk, and unless you're literally looking in the bushes trying to find them, you're not going to see them. So when we walked down, we were on a sidewalk. There was a snow fence to our right that said, "Do not cross this fence, restricted area." So we're like, okay, we're good. We're walking on the sidewalk. And we walked right straight into the Capitol. Not one barricade in our way. Not one officer asked us to stop. Nothing. We walked straight down. And when we got near the Capitol, I was like, what in the hell is going on? Because there's people scaling the building. You're starting to hear explosions in the distance. I'm like, what is going on here? And then we got the radio call. One of my guys had a radio that there were officers being assaulted and injured and all these stuff. And I'm like, oh man, this is crazy. So we get down towards the Capitol, and the crowd on the west side is obviously where the funnel was, and it just got so backed up that you couldn't even get near the Capitol building on the west side. So, especially in a group, we're in a large group trying to move somebody. So I'm like, look, we're going to have to go around, and then we knew the stage was supposed to be on the east side anyway, so we went around the outside of the whole crowd and then came up from the north side, I believe it was the north side of the Capitol, and went around to the east. So we walked around the north side and then tailed around to the east side. And when we got there, there's no stage. I'm like, oh shit, no stage. What's going on here? So made a quick phone call, found out what was going on. No stage, don't know what's happening. We're trying to get everybody back together and regroup, and then we'll go cover some other stages that are, obviously going on in town. They had one in Freedom Plaza. They had the Latinos for Trump, which was like 2 or 3 blocks away from the Capitol in a lot that they had secured. So we had a couple other groups doing security there. So that was Stewart's plan. There was a 90-second phone call that hinged a tremendous amount in my trial. This 90-second phone call was a 3-way call between Stewart Rhodes, Michael Green, and myself. Now, Michael Green, I'm the leader of the Oath Keepers of Florida. Michael Green was the on-site leader that day. He was the person I report to for anything that goes on, any questions, any problems. That's the guy I call. Stewart obviously was there walking around kind of doing, Overwatch or whatever you want to call it. Could kind of fill in wherever he was needed. So the phone call was multifaceted in the aspect of what the DOJ tried to do with it. On about 2 weeks to 3 weeks after I was in jail, or I should say after I was in D.C., my attorney contacted me and told me they want you to say this, and they're going to let you go. And I said, what do they want me to say? And they're like, they want you to tell you that phone call that you made to Stewart Rhodes, that he told you to go in the building. They want you to cooperate, and they'll let you go home. And I said, well, here's the problem. So there's 2 things. I want to go very clear. I will 100% cooperate. But that is not what happened on that phone call, and I'm not going to say it did. And he said, if you don't do this, you're going to be not going anywhere for quite a while. And I said, I'm not lying. I said, because if I'm home or if I'm in jail, I still got to look in the mirror. And I'm not lying about what somebody said. That's not what happened on that phone call. And no one ever asked me what happened on that phone call. Ever. Until this day.
I believe it.
No one ever asked me what was really said on that phone call. And that phone call came up in trial multiple times, and they spun this thing that Stuart Rhodes commanded Kelly Meggs to go in the building at that call. And Stuart couldn't remember what the call was about because it was non-consequential. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was probably dealing with 80 phone calls at the same time. And he beeped over, and I said, hey, Stuart, there's no freaking stage here. What are we going to do? And he said, look, I know there's no stage here. I don't know what the hell's going on. They're freaking storming the damn building. We need to all regroup over here and make sure all these other stages are covered. And I said, okay, let me find Kenny because we got split up and we'll come and meet you. And he goes, okay. Told me where it was. He says, I'm on the kind of the northeast corner facing the Supreme Court. So I kind of had a general idea where it was. So I start looking around for Kenny, and we walk over kind of close to the stairs on the east side near the Columbus doors. And I look up, and there's Kenny waving away. I'm like, how did I just see him in this whole crowd? You know what I mean? But there he was. So I looked at my group, and I said, guys, hang on, because we're going to go up and see Kenny. You know what I mean? And so we started walking up the stairs, and my wife, I told her, I said, hang on, because I don't want to get separated. So she grabbed the back of my shoulder or my strap on my body armor, whatever it was.
Oh, no. And is this the stack?
This is the stack. And then it just started a freaking chain of events, which we had done like 3 or 4 times on the way. When the crowd got really, really big and we could barely make through, everybody would grab onto each other, and we'd get single file. And then once we got in an area we could open back up, everybody kind of spread back out again. Get in a tight crowd, you go back down. So now we have a full-on military attack-style formation going up the Capitol steps. Or is it a kindergarten hand-to-hand train? I'm not sure, but it's one or the other.
Right.
Okay? So, but the government, they're going to show, they're showing Navy SEALs doing it, and they're showing Marines doing it, and Special Forces, this is how we operate, and then they show us. And I'm like, really? I'm a car salesman. What are you doing? I'm like, I don't even know you do that. You know what I mean? I just told somebody to hang on to me so we didn't get separated. But, we get to the top of the stairs. Kenny's there. I'm like, what's up, bro? They were singing the national anthem, praying. And I stopped, lit a cigarette, and started drinking a bottle of water. And we stood there for a minute. I'm like, what's up, man? Oh, we got separated. I'm like, where's your group? He's like, they took off. I don't know where they're at. Because it was chaos, There's literally a video of Kenny watching his group run over the damn barricades going into the building, or up towards closer to the building. And Kenny stood there. They stood there for 3 or 4 minutes going, what the hell do we do? And Kenny's like, I don't know what we do. And he's like, the other guy goes, I think we need to go up there. And Kenny's like, what? I'm not going up there. And he goes, yeah, they just ran up there. We're supposed to be with it. We got to go up there. And Kenny's like, oh, man, whatever. Kind of that's the attitude he had. So they walked up close to the building, and literally they walked up, and every time the crowd moved back, the crowd was pushing way ahead. I mean, Kenny and them were nowhere near the front of the crowd. They were probably 30, 40 people back. They were not pushing. They were not doing anything. They were doing the whole Trump, Trump, Trump chant with everybody else, like the crowd was doing. You get caught up in it. And so they ended up, once the whole stairs were cleared, Kenny ends up on like the 4th or 5th step from the top of the, from the Columbus doors off the veranda there, I call it. He's like 4 or 5 steps down. So we go up there, we see him, sing the national anthem, talk a little bit, and this guy comes down from the veranda, and I didn't know this at the time. I had no idea. I heard some guy kind of poke his head down and say, hey, we need help up here. The police. And I'm like, okay, well, I already heard the police were being attacked. So I'm like, something's happening, not good. You know what I mean? So the guy behind us, who I had no idea who he was the nephew of an oath keeper who was hanging out with us that day. He wasn't even really an oath keeper. He heads up the stairs, and I'm like, well, I guess we better see what's going on. So as we start to move, there was no like, hey guys, let's go up here. It was just like we started moving. And it was really strange because the crowd kind of separated. It was really weird. And everybody's like, it's the Oath Keepers. Yeah, go in. Come on, let's go, let's go. We're like, what the hell's going on here? Well, then we get about 15, 20 feet from the door, and there's nothing going on here. Everybody's just standing here chanting, we want Trump. We want Trump. So I'm like, okay, I guess there's nothing going on here. What the hell are we doing up here? Well, that second, boom, the doors opened up. And when those doors opened up, all hell broke loose. The crowd surged up from, I'm going to say it had to be from the bottom of the steps, because the push that we had going on was unbelievable. I literally, I'm 6'5", 300 pounds. I'm screaming at my wife to make sure she keeps her feet underneath her. She's a lot smaller than me. But I was worried because being so tall, the people behind me that were pushing were literally lifting me off the ground. So I was concerned that when we get to the threshold and the pressure kind of subsides, I'm going to go tumbling on my ass and someone's going to step on me and I'm going to end up getting trampled under this whole crowd, and especially worried about her because she's like 5'5" and maybe 110 pounds, you know what I mean? So I'm really worried that she's going to get crushed. So I'm like, baby, just hang on and make sure you got your feet under you. That's all you can do. And I'm yelling. Literally, you can hear me yelling as we're going through the door, stop pushing, stop pushing, stop pushing. And then the next thing I know, I'm in the building. And once I get my bearings, we kind of gather everybody up. I'm like, oh, where is everybody? Everybody okay? We got everybody okay? The flow of the crowd is just pouring. You can't go back out. You're not going back out. There's no way.
Right.
The flow is too huge. So we end up, all right, let's go this way where the rest of the crowd's kind of going. And there's an officer there literally fist bumping people right in front of me. So I'm like, all right, well, this can't be all bad then. The guy's letting everybody in. No big deal. So we walked into the room. It was a circle room to me. I didn't know what it was called. I never paid any damn attention to it. It was the rotunda. But I didn't realize when I got in there, I'm like, holy crap, look at this. This is amazing. And we're walking around, and Jess is screaming at people because some dude's trying to grab a flag somewhere, and they're tearing apart the stanchions. And we're like, dude, stop. This is a respected and honored building. Let's stop this nonsense. You know what I mean? So Jess is yelling at everybody to stop and not to vandalize the place. And we all kind of did the same thing. But more than anything, you're just kind of trying to get your bearings because you're like, next thing you know, you're in the building. You know what I mean? It was weird. It wasn't planned. It was never thought of. It's just kind of where you ended up. And that was a situation that was, it was kind of crazy. But once we kind of got our bearings and everybody kind of like settled in, like, okay, let's remember what we do. So Kenny and I and Connie and all of us, Joe Hackett, we backed up over in the corner of the room, which there's no corners in a round room, I understand that. But there was a hallway, and we kind of nestled up against this statue so that we were out of the flow of the crowd, and we could kind of watch what was going on. And I seen a guy fall to the ground, so I went over to him, and I grabbed him. I'm like, "Are you all right, man?" And he's like, "No, man, I'm just praying." And I'm like, "Hey, you know what? We'll pray with you." Well, Kenny had came over too at the same time because he didn't know what was going on. So like 3 or 4 of us ended up just getting down there. Really great shot somewhere out there in the world. This guy's got a video of us praying, and he laid his phone down in the middle, so you've got all of our heads sitting in it praying, and the roof of the rotunda above us. It's really a cool picture if you ever get a chance to see it. But so we did our praying, and then we were walking back over to the same spot we were at before. And as we came, Joe Hackett walks out and goes, "Hey, he grabs Kenny, not me. He grabs Kenny and goes, "Hey, there's an officer down here. He's losing his shit. There's a problem, you know?"
Right.
So Kenny's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, there's a problem down here." Well, I didn't hear that, so I'm standing there. Kenny walks down the hallway about 8 feet into the hallway, and there's an officer standing underneath this thing they call the hurricane chandelier, the hurricane lamp. I don't even know what they really refer to it as, but it's in the small rotunda. It's just outside of the speaker's office. And there's a stairwell that goes downstairs to another part of the building. I believe it ends up in the crypt, they said. So Harry Dunn, this big 6'8", 6'9", 350-pound dude, is sitting there with his rifle, shaking like a damn leaf, screaming and yelling and carrying on about how he's going to, if we're going to try to get past him and we're trying to steal his vote, and that he's going to kill a whole bunch of people with him. If we're going to take him out, he's going to take a whole bunch of us with him and all this shit. So Kenny's like, you need to hold on, calm the fuck down, I'm going to be right back. Right. So Kenny came and tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, dude, we got a problem over here, man. This officer's losing his shit. I'm like, okay, come on. So we walk over there, and there he is, shaking like a leaf on a tree, screaming still. So I'm like, look, calm down, we'll help you. So there wasn't a ton of people there at the time. There was probably 5 or 6 people sitting there yelling at him. So we got in front of them and kind of just nudged him back, let him know, look, man, leave this guy alone. Just keep on going down the hallway. Keep going down. Keep going. Let's go. You ain't going to go this way. This way. You ain't coming this way, okay? So he was able to relax enough that he literally, we have a picture of him standing behind us with his hands on his hips. You know what I mean? So he was calm. And let me tell you something. It was me, it was Kenny, and it was my wife. Right? My wife, 5'4", 110 pounds, standing in front of Harry Dunn, who's like this 7-foot giant,
Right.
And he's still yelling at the crowd. And my wife has to tell him, look, you're not helping. You need to calm down. You're yelling. He said, you stole my vote. I voted for Biden. I don't care about your damn MAGA. I mean, he's just going on. He would not let it rest. So long story short, we stood there for 6 minutes, and he had a riot squad that came up the stairs behind him. When that riot squad came up the stairs behind him, I made eye contact with the leader guy, and I said, you good? He said, we're good. Go. As soon as he said that, boom, we made a beeline back for the door we came in, the Columbus door. As we were going around the rotunda, we made it over there, and there was no way you were getting out because the crowd was still coming in just as fast as it was trying to get out. There were a lot of people trying to leave, honestly, right at that time. So I ended up going around the outside of the whole crowd, and I saw 3 officers standing by the door doing nothing. They were literally sitting there doing nothing, talking to each other. And then there was one, motorcycle cop or something that had a shield, and he was just banging on this old man. This guy had to be 70, 80 years old, had a World War II veteran hat on, and this cop was laying in it, walking around all the young people, walking around us to lay into this old man.
Shocking.
And we're like, look, dude, you need to stop that right now. That's not cool. And so he stopped for a minute, and we're like, just relax, man. It's okay, everything, just calm down. Sure enough, he'd walk right around us, bam, hit that old man again. We're like, look, bro, this is your last warning. You better stop doing what you're doing. You know what I mean? And I guess it finally registered because I think the chaos, sometimes even with an officer, if you're not in that environment a lot and you're not trained the right way, your response is extremely poor in most situations. So I think what he was doing is finding the weakest and feeblest person that he could actually take out his aggression from the situation on. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the officers that day responded that way. So as much as I can ridicule those people that panicked, like Towell and Bagshaw and all those guys that panicked, like this guy that was trying to hit the old man that panicked, I have nothing but respect for the men and women that sat on the side, and guys like, someone like Tariq Johnson, who actually that was his calm under fire. You know what I mean? He actually went into the crowd with a MAGA hat on to grab Oath Keepers to help him get police out of the building. That guy should be in charge of the Capitol Police now. But no, what did they do? They fired him. Because he was a thinker, and they don't want thinkers. They just want people that take out their aggression, and that's what these people were doing. So all those Capitol Police that were on the sideline who kind of stood back and went, wait a minute, this thing's going to burn itself out. Let's not get too over-aggressive, and let's relax. Then I think that, there's 2 sides of that coin. Number one, it turned out that they were just letting everybody in, and then you had a few cops that were still fighting people back. And so it created a bit of a confusion, not only amongst the police, but also amongst the crowd. So it was kind of weird that you're letting us all in, but at the same time, you're going to beat us all back out. So that was kind of the confusion that was going on by the door. But I actually walked over to those three on the side and I said, hey, look, I said, we're never going to get this building cleared out if you don't stop these people from coming in the damn building. And he goes, there's nothing we can do. I said, there's a freaking riot squad sitting right outside of this door. He goes, they will not respond to me. They won't do anything. They're just standing there. I'm like, I can stop these people from coming in this building. And he goes, if you think you can, go ahead. And I just stood there in front of the door and I said, stop, stop. I started screaming and they stopped. When they all stopped, I said, now hang on. Let me get these people out and then you guys can do whatever the hell you want to do. So I stood at that door for 6 minutes. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Tapping people on the shoulder, escorting them out of the building. And one by one, they went out of the building.
And it's on CCTV that you're
Played it in my trial. Didn't matter. Which I know we don't want to talk about the trial too much, but that all these things were complete lies. Everything that they tried to say happened didn't happen. And it's just amazing that it's gone on this long. And that's something that, the effects of it, even though, going into C2B and meeting the guys in C2B and going through C2A and all, and just the things that happened over the last 4 years, the real hell that we're going through, as bad as it's been, there's a lot of guys experiencing a lot of crazy stuff right now that I never imagined we would be going through.
Yeah.
So I don't know how in depth you want to go into our jail time in D.C.
I mean, well, let's continue on from there. You largely, your time in the Rotunda and the Capitol building was really just of keeping the peace. And so take us through the point where you leave the Capitol and really what happens from that point on, because there's always this period, there's the calm before the storm, before the raids, before the arrests. What happens from that point on? How do you get picked up? How did they find you? Take us through this period of uncertainty. Like, what was going on through your head and what happened from that point on?
Well, as far as leaving the building is, like I said, we got those people out of the building. And then once the crowd subsided inside, I looked at that officer, one of the lady officers, while I was doing this, literally helping people out of the building. She leans up to me and goes, is it okay if I go to the bathroom? I'm like, you're asking me? Go to the bathroom. I don't care. You know what I mean? So I'm like helping people out of the building. So as soon as the crowd got down there, I looked at the officer and I said, man, you need to get some help. I'm out of here. And I walked out that door and he fist bumped me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we walked out the door and we stood on the patio for probably 20 or 30 minutes. Jess was taking care of a couple of rioters that had been sprayed in the eyes and stuff like that. They had a little liquid that they were spraying in their eyes to calm that down. She actually had somebody that was really messed up. She took them down. They literally carried them down to the ambulance down on the outside. And then when she came back up, we all just walked down to the corner of the building, hung out there for about an hour until everybody regrouped. And then we went back to the hotel. We were back in the hotel by 5 o'clock, probably well before curfew. But it was amazing that night when we got back to the hotel, did a couple beers, grabbed something to eat. We're sitting there, turned the TV on. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on here? And the footage of what was happening at the Capitol was nothing like what I had seen. They were showing the other side of the building. And that's where all the violence was. That's where they funneled everybody into that tunnel in that area. And then the beatdown began, So it wasn't good on that side of the Capitol. Yeah. And that's when I texted my whole group. I said, gentlemen, we are officially now the enemy of the state because they are going to come after us hard for sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I meant us in general as far as MAGA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, so the next morning, that night we just went to bed watching the news and woke up the next morning. Honestly, I didn't even think anything of it. I didn't even think twice about being arrested. I assumed I would be talked to. because I was there and I was in the building. But I never imagined in a million years that they would arrest me for what I did that day. So I basically got everybody together at 7 o'clock in the morning, got in the truck, and we drove back to Florida. The next 4 weeks, really, we just were like, what is going on? And we just saw the compounding news coverage of the Capitol riot and the overthrow of our government and all these things. And I'm like, what in the hell? So I'm like, this is not good. You know what I mean? I'm like, this really isn't good. We need to start. And then I saw that Jess got arrested. And I'm like, what the hell did they arrest Jess for? You know what I mean? And so I'm reading the article about Jess, and they're not telling you the truth of what Jess did. They're telling you how Jess was on some crazy Zello chat, telling them how she's storming the building and she's been training for this all her life and all these different things. But it wasn't Jess saying that; it was the people in the chat that weren't in the building saying that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they're trying to egg her on to do something, and honestly, there was a lot of discussion about who some of the people were in that chat. And we honestly believe that some of those people were agents, provocateurs, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
That were in that, and feds, basically.
1% watchdog or whatever.
Yeah, 1% watchdog was just, go in there, Jess, take them down. You got to do a citizen arrest and strap down all these congressmen and drag them out. I'm like, what in the hell? I read this in this article, right? I'm like, what in the hell was Jess doing? I'm like, I had no idea. I'm like, we have to distance ourselves from these people. This is crazy. You know what I mean? So I'm like, this shit is nuts. And then I'm like, there's no way Jess did this stuff because she was with me except for like 10 minutes when we were doing the Harry Dunn thing. You know what I mean? Well, I'm like, this is crazy. This is nuts. So now I'm like thinking, all right, maybe they will come and talk to me, or maybe they will come get me. I don't know. But my life was pretty much the same. I've lived here for a long time. Been in Ocala for 17 years. I was working in Lake City, hour and a half away. Been at that dealership for 4 or 5 years. Worked for the same group for 12. I wasn't going anywhere. I was either home or I was at work. And I was doing the same thing I had always done. And I heard a lot more helicopters at my house. We live in the country a little bit, so there's not a lot of helicopters and planes and stuff like that. And I live on a road that's only got 8 houses on it. So traffic is super low. Like, if your horse gets out, no one's hitting it. You're going to be able to go get your horse and bring it back in, So there's no traffic. Traffic increased massively on my road. Helicopters start flying over a lot more. Airplanes are flying over all the time. I'm telling other people, I'm like, man, they have got to be watching me right now because they are flying over. I mean, there's all kinds of shit going on around here that never happens, So I had kind of an idea that they were looking at me, and I went to an attorney. I put together, basically, I wrote this exact story that I just told you. Wrote it all down and had videos and pictures. I included all those. Took them to the attorney. And he goes, all right, well, what do you want to do? I said, do I need to go talk to him? I mean, what should I do? And he goes, here's what I'd do if I were you. If your story's true, and you didn't do any violence, and you didn't destroy anything. And I said, nope, we did not. He goes, go back to your house, put all of this in your fire pit, and burn it. Don't leave any evidence. I'm like, but I didn't do anything. He goes, that's their problem, not yours. I'm like, you're sure? He's like, yep, don't worry about it. They're never going to come talk to you. I'm like, all right, fine. So I left, came home, put it in my closet. I'm not burning it. You know what I mean? I'm just not. Because I'm like, if they come for me, I actually ended up taking it out, putting it in a folder in the kitchen, and told my son, if they come and get me, this folder needs to go to whoever my attorney's going to be. Because this proves that we did not do what they say we did. So, took that folder, put it out in the kitchen, and sure enough, what was it? February 17th, as soon as I pulled out of the driveway, they pulled me over, had me down in the middle of the street out here, not my street, the main street over here on the side once you get out of my neighborhood. And they had me land on the thing, helicopters in the air flying over. had ATF, Joint Terrorism Task Force, Department of Homeland Security, Marion County Sheriffs, FBI, all of them were there. And then they arrested me, shackled, put handcuffs on me, threw me in the back of the car, and then they got in my truck and drove us back to the house. They opened my front gate. Now we have dogs, pigs, donkeys, horses, chickens, goats. We got everything, right? Well, they opened my front gate and basically asked them to close it, so they did. But the video of them pulling cars into my front gate is like 2.5 minutes long. Of cars just pulling in and pulling in and pulling. There must have been 30, 40 cars in my driveway or in my front yard, just surrounded the whole house. My wife's coming back from back feeding the chickens or feeding the animals in the morning, and there's a gun pointed on her. And I'm watching this all from the back of my freaking police car, right? I'm in the back of the car looking, and she walks around the side of the house, and boom, there they are. And she's like, what's going on? What? You know what I mean? So it's on. I'm like, we're getting arrested right now. You know what I mean? This is crazy. I'm like, they don't even want to talk to us. They don't even want to know what we did. You know what I mean? They're just taking us in. I'm like, this is insane. Well, next thing I know, she's in the car, and now they're dragging my daughter with her baby in her arms, my daughter's boyfriend, my 9-year-old grandson, all at gunpoint. They're dragging them out of the house one by one. Now, my daughter lives in a separate house, I should say that. There's 2 houses about 50 feet apart. And they take them out of that house, and my grandson, who was staying in this house, took him out of this house at gunpoint. And started unloading everything, and started just pulling shit out of my house. Set up big tables out there, helicopters still flying around. I'm like, this is crazy, man. And the whole time I'm trying to get the attention of one of the officers to like go, hey, can you at least tell me what in the hell is going on here? You know? But they went, I had a big RV, 41-foot RV over on the side of the house, parked in between the 2 houses. It was my 5th wheel. And they were in that thing, and they went in that thing hard, buddy, like 5 or 6 of them, fully ready to roll, you know? And then they come out, and I'm like, what are they doing in my RV? I mean, what the hell does that have to do with anything? So I was really confused until I got to the FBI office. So they go through my house, they do all that stuff. Meantime, they're shuffling me and my I did not know in any way, shape, or form that would be the last time I saw my house for 4 years.
Mm.
I never would have believed that in a million years if you would have told me that. When I left in that police car that night, or that morning, I would have never believed that. But that's exactly what happened. So that's the last time I saw my house until I got home January 23rd. So it was pretty crazy. That's the one vision I always had in my mind was when I was driving away in that car looking back at my house. And I just was like, this is unbelievable. So they were taking us, so they drive us out of here, and we've got a long road. It's like 8 miles long that connects to State Road 40, which is a big road that, goes into town. So we're driving along in the back of the car, and they put me and my wife together now, so at least we can talk like, what the hell's going on, what's happening, this, that, and the other. And the sheriff up front's like, look, I can't tell you anything. Just wait till we get to the FBI office. That's where you're going now. He's like, look, they're probably going to interview you. They'll probably take you down, book you, and then you guys will be home tonight. Don't worry about it. So we go down, and as we're driving, I see box trucks, armored vehicles, all kinds of shit heading this way. And I look at my wife, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, are they they're going to take our damn animals. They're driving they're driving trailers, horse trailers and stuff. I'm like, are they going to our house? And the guy goes, no, they're not. They're training at the airport down the road from your house. I'm like, oh, at least that was a little bit better. I'm like, whew, I got me worried there. But so they didn't bring all that stuff here. They didn't take our animals, and they didn't bring all the armored vehicles here. So I didn't get any armored vehicles. But once I got to the FBI office, 3-4 hours of interviews. They asked me basically what happened. I told them the same story I just told you guys.
Yeah.
They refused to. They kept asking me a question. Who are you? And I said, my name's Kelly Meggs. No. no. That's not, that's not what we mean. Who are you? And I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying to me. And they're like, well, you can't really tell us that you're just a car salesman. You know too many people. I'm like, how do I know too many people? They're like, you're on the phone with the White House on Sunday. I'm like, the day before, 3 days before January 6th, what do you know? I'm like, I was on a freaking call with the people that were putting on the event. And we were doing our Secret Service clearance with them, and I had to fax stuff to them and all this stuff. I'm like, I can't, I'm not talking to the freaking president. You know what I mean? I was on the phone with the press secretary or somebody, assistant press secretary probably, if that, I'm like, I was just talking to them about getting the clearance done for the freaking Secret Service so that we can go to the event. And they're like, oh, and Roger Stone? Yeah, you've got his personal, we've got pictures of you with him. And I'm like, so what? Millions of people have their picture with Roger Stone. The guy does a lot of events, So it was just a lot of like, who are you? There's some bigger scam. So finally the FBI agent's like, you're telling us the truth. I said, yeah. He goes, man, they told us that you guys had, since you're the leader of the Oath Keepers, that you had guys in the RV armed, ready to take us out when we came in. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, that's why we didn't take you at your house. I said, what? He's like, yeah, that's what they told us, that you have a security team around you 24 hours a day, ready to go. I'm like, that's insane.
You think that guy was just full of shit and he was just trying to get you to say more, or do you think someone actually told him that?
Someone told him that, for sure. And I know why. You know how I know he did? Because he broke protocol on multiple things over the next hour that made me show that he believed what I was telling him.
Okay.
Because I saw it in his face the minute he realized that he had done something wrong.
Yeah.
I saw it. It hit him. He's like, this is all bullshit.
Yeah.
This is all bullshit. And so much so that even after the interview and everything, I'm like, I really have to use the bathroom. He's like, come on, you can go back here. He opened the door. I was still obviously handcuffed. He opens the door to the back, and there's a picture of Trump up on the wall with all the other presidents before him, right?
Right.
I said, oh, I'm surprised you still got him up here. I figured you guys would have thrown that out by now. He goes, as long as I'm in this office, that picture's going to stay right where it is. And then he walked me to the bathroom, let me to the bathroom, we walked back out. But that's really the whole story as far as, the arrest day was. But I really thought, like, he told us, we're going to go to Marion County Jail, you're going to get booked in, you're going to do a quick phone call for your bond hearing, you'll be back home by, this afternoon late, don't worry about it. I'm like, finally, man, it was great, you know what I mean? I'm like, good news. And that didn't happen, so I finally got in the unit after the bond call, and they told us that we were terrorists. We were never getting out of jail ever again the rest of our lives. Not really, they didn't say that, but in general, they threw all that at all of us.
Yeah.
I ended up getting in the unit at 1 o'clock in the morning, from 7 o'clock in the morning when they arrested us. So, disaster of a day, just something I never want to ever relive the rest of my life. And it's hard because you don't think about those it's weird because you look at it as an overview. You don't dissect the individual days. And that's something that I think most of us have to deal with that people don't understand is like, yes, there's a lot of things that happen to us, but we block most of them out, But yeah. I do remember my first night in jail walking into an 88-man pod, 44 double bunks, and the lights are already out. People are already sleeping, and you're coming in there trying to fumble around and find where the hell you're supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, long story short, I didn't know if it was the right one or not. I climbed up in a bunk, and I went to bed for the night. So, and then I found out the next morning that the bond hearing we were supposed to have the next day, they had a quick, I guess it's a detaining hearing the first time, and then you actually have a bond hearing, that had been postponed until Monday. So that was arrested on a Wednesday. So now I got to be in jail Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I had no clue. How am I going to survive in jail for 4 days? I don't even understand how it's possible that I could make it that long.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine there was probably some level of intimidation with your size and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that helped. That's the one thing that helped me is that I was a big dude. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
really feel bad for my wife. I mean, my wife's tiny. She's cast into a unit that I can't even imagine. But fortunately, really fortunately, there were a couple of, and I think that there tends to be in every place you go. There's a couple of people that are cool and understanding and they get it. You know what I mean? So they kind of give you a little bit of a buffer from the whole real jail experience. There's a little bit of a buffer there because you do meet some people that are
Human.
they shouldn't even be there. You know what I mean? I mean, like these people messed up, but they don't need to be in jail for 10 months, 11 months for freaking DUI or something stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I understand that that's not always going to happen the way you want it to, but there's a lot of people in jail right now that shouldn't be there. And I think that's part of the problem with the way our justice system is twisted, is that now it's not a matter of giving someone an applicable punishment for the crime. It's more about what's the maximum I can get out of this.
Yeah.
It's like there's a scorecard, and the more you get, I almost wonder if there's a freaking pay plan out there for these guys, that the more time they give somebody, the more money they make. Because they certainly go overboard with this stuff. It's crazy.
No, I'm sure. I'm sure there is. I mean, you have what they call the prison industrial complex at the federal level, but I remember being in Northern Neck, Virginia, there were murmurs, at least, that there were judges actually who owned the jails. That the judges themselves have stocks in the stock, for lack of a better term, in the actual county jails. So, I mean,
and I think that's true because I had heard the same thing about Marion County and Grady County. So I think that a lot of that is true.
Yeah. Well, so that's something that you imagine there might be some reason how that developed in the past, in the American antiquity, let's call it, where that might have made sense, but there's also the likelihood that just like anything else, there are just practices that have gone long unnoticed that were just purely nepotistic and corrupt. And just nobody bothers to address. I could definitely see that being the case, that it just sort of developed and everybody just kind of was hush-hush about it.
Yep. So from there, I sat there for 2 weeks, got shipped out to Grady, Oklahoma. They took me down to Orlando where I spent a night in Seminole County Jail. I did get to see my wife for about 3 hours that day because we were in the waiting area. She was across from me so I could see her in the glass. I was in the other glass. And then they put us in the vehicle together, and we weren't supposed to be talking. The marshals yelled at us a couple times, but for the most part, I remember holding her finger, you know what I mean? Like, they couldn't see it, so she would put her hand down the side a little bit, and I could reach up to her seat in front of me and at least put my hand on hers for a second. And I did not know that that'd be the last time I saw her. Well, that actually isn't true. That's not true at all. I'm thinking that's the last time I talked to her. The next time I saw her was the day after I spent in Seminole. They took me back to Tampa Airport, and she was with me in the van to Tampa Airport. But these guys, I don't remember if there was a glass up or there was no talking. There was no way we could communicate at all. And she was against the window, and I was against the other window, so there's no way we could communicate. But I remember they took us out and put me on the airplane, and I'm on the airplane. I'm looking out the window, and they're getting ready to load her on the airplane. And we actually wanted to go to D.C. We were excited because we were going to the feds now. It was going to be so much better. And we could actually get in front of the judge. The judge could see that all this was bullshit and that we don't belong in prison, or jail. We don't belong here. There's been a mistake. So I remember looking out the window, and they're holding her out there. And then the guys from the plane come down, and they start talking, and they're all looking. There's 5 or 6 people around her. I'm like, everybody else is on the plane. We're ready to roll. You know what I mean? And they put her back in the van, and they take her away.
Hmm.
And then that's the last time I saw my wife for 4 years, except for one visit when she was in her trial. She came to the D.C. jail during her trial, so she was gone, and that was it. And her story's just the same as mine. I mean, she was there for another 2 weeks, and finally, the judge let her out. So the marshals come in and say, "Okay, you're being transported tomorrow. We've got to cut off your wedding ring." So they took her to the hospital where they have a cutting machine, and they cut her wedding ring off. Paid $10,000 for this wedding ring. It's 3-carat diamond, whatever. They cut this wedding ring off of her, right? And destroy it. It's in pieces now. And the next morning, you got bond. You can go.
Jeez.
Yeah. So they let her out on bond. So that night she got to come home, which is better. Look, I would rather have the ring in shambles at that point than the rest. They'd have to go through what we ended up going through in D.C. I am so happy. It was such a disappointment at the time that she did not get on that plane. It was devastating to her and to me. But it was a blessing from God. Because if she would have made that trip to D.C., we went through a lot of bad shit. You can only imagine what the women were going through on the other side when we first got there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I don't I can't even imagine the blessing that was, that she was left behind and that she ended up getting bond. So I don't think she would have got bond had she went to D.C. I don't think they were going to let her out. I just don't. So I'm very happy she stayed, and I think the fact that there was so much of a thing about her wedding ring being a weapon and all these different things, and it went on for 2 weeks, argument, and finally they decided to cut off. But I just think the judge said, "Look, just let this lady go home. She's been through enough." You know what I mean? So I think that actually weighed out in our favor. But when I got to D.C., finally I went through Grady in Oklahoma for a weekend, fortunately. And then I get to D.C., and when I got to D.C., it's a Monday night. They brought me in at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. And Monday night, they put me in a cell. And I was not let out of that cell until Friday afternoon for a shower. Because the caseworker, I don't remember her name. I'm surprised you don't remember her name. Who was our first caseworker when we were there? You know her. She wore the Kamala shirt all the time.
Yeah, she went in there she would try to just stir shit.
Or the Hillary. I can't remember what shirt she was on. Hillary shirt.
It was a Kamala shirt. It was a Kamala shirt. I remember people wrote grievances about it. She was just trying
exactly. But anyway, so she was there, and it's funny because I came in with 8 people: Ryan Nichols, Cash Kelly, Guy Reffitt. We all came in together. As we came in, the next morning, she went through every single person. Tuesday morning, she went through every single person. Okay, check them in, let them make their one phone call. Boom, they're out for an hour. They locked out. She never came and got me. She forgot me. I didn't get done that day. Well, she was off the next 3 days.
Oh.
And the guards said, "You can't come out. You haven't been cleared yet. You haven't been through the system. You can't come out of the cell." So they did not let me out until Friday afternoon. And she was there Friday afternoon. She finally came in. I seen her. I was banging on the door. The guard came over. "What's wrong?" I'm like, I need to see her. So she came over, and I said, "Look," I said, "I haven't been out of my cell since Monday. I haven't talked to my kids. They say I keep having to see you. I have to see you." And she's like, "When did you get here?" I said, "I got here on Monday." She's like, "I thought I did all the guys on Monday." I'm like, "No," and they haven't let me out. She immediately got me out, let me at least make a phone call, contact my kids. But I seen her yelling at the guards, like, "How did you let this guy sit in here for 4 days before you let him out?" And they wrote it in their book. They have a ledger. You know the ledgers they write all this shit in. She wrote it in the book. So I know it's there, that they didn't let me out. And I think she scolded them and said, "Look, you got to let these guys out at least to take a shower every other day."
And this is when you're still in A, right? Before you filter to B?
Yeah, we were in C2A. And then, we heard that C2B was the land of milk and honey. It was. I mean, we knew that, like, man, once we get to C2A, man, you're out all day. You're just having a party, you know. So
party's just started.
Yeah, I'm like, this is gonna be great, man. Shit, it's gonna be awesome. All Jan 6 guys are over there. This will be cool. So because everybody that was, you know, it was weird because solitary confinement is very hard at first, and then it almost becomes enjoyable to a point, which is really strange to say. But like, I remember when I was in Memphis, we would get locked down, and I would be just like, good, I can relax. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, you're not missing anything because there's nothing going on.
Yeah,
so it's kind of a weird feeling, but when you're first put in there and you're not used to that, your mind starts playing tricks on you. And they didn't give it, you know, in C2A, you didn't get no reading material, you got no radio, you've got no commissary, you've got nothing. You're just you and your mind, and it's like all you can do is kind of try to make yourself sleep, and it's very difficult to do that. So that's what I remember mostly about C2A is just being so excited when we finally got moved over to C2B. And when we got moved to C2B, it was exactly the fucking same, except we had commissary. You know what I mean? It was like, I was like, what is this? We've been lied to. You know what I mean? But I don't know if what was the guy's name that was the C2A custodian? I remember his name for a little bit, but I forgot it.
Munchell?
Munchell, yeah, Eric Munchell. I mean, I remember him sliding under the coffee under the doors and everything, trying to make everybody happy and keep everybody going. But I don't know if he did that intentionally. He told us how great it was in C2B and how you're out all the time over there. Don't worry, it's not going to be bad. I think he just lied to us to keep us positive.
He probably he might have. He might have.
He may have.
I never spoke to Munchell. I never went to A. I came with Curgio and Lang and a couple chomos, and I tested positive for COVID somehow, even though I didn't test for it right before I left Virginia. And they put me in a quarantine pod, not C2A, just like a medical unit, and they kept me there for a few days. And then they brought me to C2B, so I bypassed A, and I never got to meet Munchell and a couple other people. So like it's an interesting. That's why I like to ask about A and get people's perspectives about how they transfer in, because like I never went through that.
I remember just trying to we would flip our lights on and off, just like so people could know you're trying to say. People, you flip your light on and off, the dude would be looking at you from across the way, and you like wave at him. Like, yeah, there's a guy over there. Look at that, that's cool. You know, like you didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
I mean, it took a little time to figure out who everybody was, but once you did, the whole story. You go to everybody's window and you talk to them through the glass, and you get to know everybody in C2A. So then you kind of, when people go over next door, you're kind of moving all together. It's kind of cool the way it worked out, just because like right now, look, we're here talking. I didn't know you from Adam 4 years ago. You know what I mean?
Right.
And here we are. It's like we're just going to be friends the rest of our lives out of this, and it's because we were tortured basically together. It's funny. My wife says that all the time. She's like, I'm like, I don't understand why I'm having such a hard time with this. And she's like, you were freaking tortured for 2 years in DC. I'm like, I don't look at it that way though, but I guess you could,
Yeah. It was a psyop within a psyop,
Yeah.
And
their way of trying to break us. They wanted us to be broken down and defeated and take plea deals and rat on people. And I think that's where a certain level of, regardless of whether you like some of the people or not, like there's personalities all across the board. There's some people I don't like, and I'm pretty sure you probably know who those people are. I'd be more than happy to list them, but I'm not going to. But even some of the people who weren't in your little group or any of your friends or anything like that, think of a guy like Garrett Miller. Like Garrett Miller, he never hung out with anybody. He kind of did his own little thing and bounced around a little bit. You know what I mean? But Garrett Miller is a friend of mine for life now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just to put somebody out there that's not he really didn't have one of the little groups that he belonged to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was just a guy that did his time and made some great hooch and just did some great drawings and stuff, and it's just like a little bit of a memory of somebody that was in there, just because you build that camaraderie, because literally you're all suffering together, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that even that aspect of, like, you know, you, me, Pete, Jess, McKellop and Kenny and Dan, and we can keep going, Shane and those guys, we're all going to always be pretty good friends. But then those guys that even weren't in our direct, let's do research on these guys and let's break the code to January 6th and find out what really happened and all those different things that we were doing at the time.
Yeah.
The College of Collusion in full effect, right? Even those guys that weren't involved in that were still part of us enduring through all of that. You know, the no haircuts, the no religious services, the horrible sport food, the food that smelled like chemical all the time. And
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it was, you know, it wasn't so much like a POW thing, but straight up, it was a psyop within a psyop. We were in a nut house, like literally. I know a dozen other, like, I'm sure you heard, like, some of the guards said that they cleared that place out for us weeks before January 6th, and that the CTF was basically an insane asylum. You know, the fucking,
yeah, that's what it was. That's where all the mental people were.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why there were clumps of, like, hair and feces and stuff jammed into the corners of everything. It was just like, what did McKellop say? piss, shit, jizz, snot, man spray. You know, like,
yeah, exactly. Shit, piss, jizz, and man spray.
Yeah, you know.
You should make those shirts. You'd sell a lot of those shirts if you were made them.
Probably. We got to get on that. But yeah, I mean, I you know, I'm the biggest introvert in the world, but, you know, we all needed some level of sociability to get through that, you know. So, I mean, yeah, it's steel sharpens steel, you know.
Yeah, and it did. It really did.
Yeah.
So from there, when, you know, in C2B, I kind of, you know how I did C2B. I took everything with a grain of salt and moved along. I was trying more to focus on my case than I was trying to focus on any of the little bullshit going on. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I tried to walk lightly and just avoid all the bullshit. And that's ultimately what I tried to do. I knew I had a target on my back from the DOJ based on who I was, and I didn't want to give them anything, nothing. I didn't care. I don't care what anybody said to me. You were not going to provoke me into doing something that could have jeopardized me getting back home. And that's really my mindset. That's something I decided right away. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get home, and I'm just that's got to be my focus no matter what. I don't care what happens to me. You know, I don't care. You can say anything you want to me. I don't care. I am getting home, and that really became my focus as a father, and as a husband, and as a grandfather. That was my only job.
So you said that you had a huge target on your back, and you weren't going to let anybody it seemed like you're saying you're not going to let anyone goad you into an argument or some kind of confrontation, because you know that'll be used against you. So I mean, like, inside the jail, were there people that you thought were trying to basically fuck with you or fuck your case up? Were there people in there that, especially being an oath keeper, were there people in there basically trying to sabotage your case, in your opinion?
Yeah, I definitely think there were. Actually, you know, Kenny overheard some people talking about it one day up by his cell. But, you know, I think that all of us had people that we felt like were working against us. And it was, I just feel like a small percentage of the people in there, I'll say 10% of the 40 guys, you know, were either trying to instigate, agitate within the cell, within our unit. They were trying to either gain information that could help them out with themselves, and those guys those were the people that we didn't hang out with. You know, those are the people we avoided at all costs, and I just feel that was their time. So for me, I tried not to associate with these people very much, and I certainly didn't confide anything in them as far as like what was going on in my case, or, you know, anything that had actually happened in the case. Because not that I did anything wrong, but I certainly don't want anybody to take a statement and then misuse it like the DOJ was, you know. That's all they were looking for. I'm sure they would have made deals with half the guys in there if they could get something on us, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not for nothing, but less statements against you is better than more statements against you, even if it's made up bullshit, So, I think my numbers are a little different. I always felt like upwards of like at the worst points, I felt like maybe a third of the pot in there were either rats or they were Antifa types or, as you said, agitators and provocateurs. But like if you said 10%, like of the number that you felt were either cooperating or at least working against you, or in general, of that percentage, if you could make it, like if you could estimate, how much of that do you think was people just trying to save their asses versus people who were planted in there specifically for that task?
Well, the save your ass crew would raise the numbers a little bit, I think. Because I think there were a lot of people looking for ways out, but I mean, to what extent they would go to, I don't know. I think there was probably, like, I guess my number is a little bit low, but I would say that at any given time there was probably 10 guys in there who would love nothing more than to have something they could take to the DOJ or to our prosecutors and use against us. So in the end, it probably wouldn't benefit them anyway, but they would at least think it was. So, and then you just had the guys that were just straight. I truly believe that we had at least 3 or 4 guys in there that were straight Antifa, and I'm not even talking about the guys we know that are Antifa for a fact.
Right.
But they just got caught up in the mix and were along for the ride. And unfortunately, those guys got pardons too, and I didn't. So
funny how that works.
Yep.
So inside the jail, okay, so it's almost like a pressure cooker. We're in the jail. There are a lot of, I'll just say, frankly, there are dirtbags who are in there, and you get a big enough group of anybody, you're going to get scumbags. But,
oh, yeah, absolutely.
But in general, like, did you feel like there was, I mean, I know we were in generally the same friend group, but overall, like, did you feel like there was a decent amount of camaraderie how do you think that, like, how did that change from when you first got there versus by the end of your tour of duty, let's say, by the time you leave? How did, like, the, I don't know, how did the interactions shift with time?
Well, I think initially we knew we were all locked in together. We all walked in the door thinking, like, we're Jan 6, and this is like, it's us against the facility, But then as time went on, you started getting these little factions that were like, for no better word, I'm going to use the word grifters and people that were trying to work their way out. And I just think, and I know you're thinking the same people I'm thinking of, and I'm not going to say their name or give them time, but you had people that were trying to raise money just to raise money when they didn't have there's guys in there, like, I could throw a couple of names out, like Dan Caldwell. That guy didn't even start a Give, Send, Go until he got out. Because his family was worried about it. And here's a guy that's got a family. He's got kids. He's got payments. He's got house bills. He's got cars. And that dude, and I'm begging him. I'm like, man, you have to do a Give, Send, Go. You have to, man. And then upstairs, you got dudes that are single, 3 guys that are single, talking about taking ads out in newspapers, trying to bilk as much money as possible, keeping thermometers on their wall as to how much money they've raised, doing ads in freaking NPR and CNN and just the Washington Times or the Washington Post. Just doing anything they can to raise money that they don't even need. It's like, and then one of the things I was lucky about is my son did a Give, Send, Go real early, and the people that he published it on the Gateway Pundit actually, and that thing, I was shocked. Like, he told me he was doing it. And I'm like, well, that's not going to do anything. You know what I mean? And I was floored when he told me how much. It literally saved everything for us. The only reason I'm sitting in the house that I'm sitting in right now is because of the people out there that donated.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have happened. I had to clean out my 401k. I had to sell one of my rental houses. I had to clean out all my savings. I had vehicles repossessed. My credit is destroyed, and I was freaking, my interest rate on my house is 2.5%, so that'll tell you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was rock. But when this hit, everything had to go. And I mean, that was just to keep it. And so now here we are, you know. But inside of there, you had guys that didn't need that money who lived in mom's basement, basically, you know. They talked about how they were big high rollers and, you know, they got pictures of them in BMWs and all this shit. But then you find out they're living in mom's basement.
Mom, meatloaf.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, why are you trying to raise $50,000 when all you need is commissary and the good people of the country, the patriots out there that are supporting us, they're doing it for you. You don't need the money that you're raising. It's just for your own benefit. It's not even to try to save your family or anything. And your attorneys, you've got court-appointed attorneys. So what do you care, you know? And it's just insane. It just that is one thing that really boggled my mind when you had guys in there like, you know, Jose Padilla, who's trying to, you know, he's got 2 kids, his wife out there, they're having car trouble, you know, they're having house problems, they can't keep their and this guy is helpless because you've got all these other morons running these ads and just getting people to donate all this money to him. Where's the money that those guys raised for his family? You know, that's why once I got to prison and my son did that one thing, I didn't raise a penny until I got to Memphis.
Yeah,
and that was 3 years later because I did not want to infringe on that opportunity for other people because I was so thankful for what I had. I'm like, I'm not even going to try to go back to the well. You know what I mean? It's like someone else needs to reap the benefits that these people are willing to give. I've already been blessed enough, you know, and I know Kenny felt the same way. We just avoided all that fundraising stuff. But then to see these guys who don't even need it doing it was insane. That drove me crazy. And I'm okay with a guy that wants to do a quick interview and throw his Gibson, go out there. That's normal, you know what I mean? But to excessively seek out even leftist papers and talk bad about us just to get donations was insane to me. It didn't make any sense, and that's something that really bugged me. So those are different kind of. I don't know if those people were necessarily, you know, feds as we like to call them, or were they Antifa, or did they just get so corrupted? Or are they so mentally weak that they can't keep their intestinal fortitude together long enough to stand up against it? I don't know. I don't know what caused them to do it, but it was just sickening to me. And that right there distanced me from ever speaking to those people.
Yeah, I think that, like, you know, the saying is never attribute to malice what you can attribute to stupidity. I think you can modify that. I think a lot of them were assets, but I also think that you don't need to go that far. You could just say that before J6, they were scumbags already, and they were just
exactly.
Yeah. So
and
I think,
that's what I'm saying. The guys that, you know, I could sit here and name you fucking. I'm sorry for that. I could name you probably between 6 and 10 names of guys that are going to be back in jail. It's just a matter of when. And then I can tell you about 30 names of guys that will never be arrested for anything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I know there's a huge difference of people. And those people had record. Those 10 people I just talked about, those 10 people are the same 10 people that had charges when they walked in that door.
Yeah.
Before January 6th ever happened, all those people were already in trouble. So what were they doing at January 6th when they were on probation or awaiting trial or you know, under indictment? What brought them to Jan 6 out of all of a sudden? Doesn't make sense.
Junkies, kitty diddlers.
Some with their own film crew.
Yeah. Well, you know, on that subject, you know, it's funny. You had mentioned the ones that wanted to take out ads and stuff. A lot of the problems with PFP, that individual, with the film crew, I recall he had his mommy text Cynthia and be like, such and such needs this much money so he can put an ad out for his gift sync. It's just like, it's kind of like what you said. You had all these families who needed financial support. Meanwhile, you got these single bums who were just trying to get rich off it. And
then you got guys bitching about transparency with PFP. Your transparency is walk around the damn unit and talk to the guy. Talk to 10 of the dudes who at any given time, I know for a fact their attorneys are being paid for by PFP. That's enough for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
When my wife had her trial and we're just barely scraping by to keep the house, PFP stepped up and paid for the place for her to stay whilst her 6-week trial went on in DC. So, I mean, I'm not touting them because of what they did for my family personally. I'm touting them because of what they did for everybody. It's not a matter of, hey, what did you do for me? I want to talk about it. Because honestly, I think out of all the people that got a benefit of it, I was probably one of the least from what I saw. I mean, I know for a fact there was cars purchased, there was repairs done on cars, housing, attorneys by the dozens. I mean, I know that's a fact.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. And if you didn't like your attorney and PFP gave your attorney, 25, 50, 30 grand, whatever it was, if you didn't like that attorney, that doesn't negate the fact that they got paid. I mean, you know what I mean? You could be pissed off that, oh, this attorney sucks, and then you're going to sit there and tell me how Cynthia is this and this, that, and the other. PFP's not doing the right thing. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? They just paid for your damn attorney,
Yeah.
Oh, he's the attorney. Well, that's not her fault.
Yeah, I think that goes back. It goes back again to what I said about some people were just fucking ungrateful dirtbags beforehand, and they just, even if they weren't putting in work in there, some people are just not grateful people. It's just, and again, it's just there's so many examples of I don't know if you remember, there was a certain man child, we'll call him Poop Boy. I remember he came in the jail and he was just I got my bail revoked on purpose because I thought being in the jail would be a business opportunity. I'm like, what the fuck? You know how many people would kill to get out of here on bond to be with their families?
Oh, the day he walked in the door and said, I can't even believe this is here. You guys are real. You guys are really here. I'm so happy to be here. I would have had misdemeanors only, and I was an idiot on all my calls. I'm like, this guy is a complete moron, and I don't want nothing to do with that guy. Just going to anger me that he doesn't want to be free. You know what I mean? In the end, I'll be honest with you. In the end, I'm pretty happy with some of the stuff he's doing right now. I mean, he's out there making an ass of himself, but it's funny. You know what I mean?
I wish he would just walk around with a shirt that says "Poop Boy" just once. But
that wasn't him. That was his girlfriend. Come on.
Oh yeah, totally. That was quote unquote all right. So we get in there. I was in there for approximately, I'll say the better part of 2 years. You were in there longer, but you got moved around. But while you were in there,
well, I was actually in the DC jail from March of 21.
Yeah.
In C2B, March of 21 to February of 23. So I was almost there for 2 years. I was there for 2 years, and then I got taken out and moved to Lewisburg. Lewisburg was a breath of fresh air. Let me tell you something. I really thought that's what prison was going to be like. And I'm like, this is not bad.
Yeah.
Lewisburg was the scariest I've ever been in the whole process. But in the end, it was the coolest place I was ever at. You know what I mean? Kenny and I got taken out of the unit because I guess the Marjorie Taylor Greene had gone on and said she was going to go visit the jail, and she wanted to talk to the people who had no violent charges.
Mm.
And you must have been gone by then because you had none. And I think it was just me and Kenny left that had no violent charges. So they took us out, and they came up and said, Meggs, Harrelson, you guys got to pack out. We're like, what are you talking about? We haven't even gotten sentenced yet. What do you mean we got to pack out?
Yeah.
We're like, we got trial. We got to go back for sentencing. Where are we going? You know what I mean? My sentencing is in 2 months. And they're like, no, you got to go. You got to pack out. I'm like, there's got to be a mistake here. There's no way. And it really took probably about 2 hours for it to really settle in that, shit, we're leaving. You know what I mean? We had no idea where they were sending us.
And you think
No
this
idea.
was you think this was primarily not so much because you were oath keepers, but because you just had nonviolent charges, and they were worried that MTG would see
Oh, that's the
nonviolent
only reason.
offenders.
That's the only reason that would make any sense at all. Because at that time, it was me and Kenny, and then everybody else had violent charges, or what they considered violent charges. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
quote unquote.
You know, yeah. Protecting yourself from an officer hitting you with a baton, you're guilty, right?
Right,
But
putting your hands up to stop you from getting hit.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you don't get bludgeoned in the head repeatedly. You know, you tried to stop it, but
Well, how long?
so me and Kenny get moved out, and we get put on this bus, man, and we're like, you know, we're down the hole in the cell, and we're like, what in the hell is going on? You know what I mean? Because you don't know. They never tell you where you're going. They don't. You know, that's the beauty of the BOP, man.
Yeah.
They will hide you as long as they can, and then even when you get where you're going, you can't make a call for a day or two because they just won't let you do it. And it's like you got to get cleared or whatever the hell they do. But so they wouldn't tell us where we were going. They brought us downstairs, and then they put us on this bus, and it's all like DC dudes, and it wasn't a good scene. Let me just tell you, it was not good. Except once they kind of saw us, one of the dudes on the bus spoke up. He was like, "Hey, man, what are you guys doing here? Where are you guys from?" You know, we're from Florida. We're Jan 6 guys, and they perked right up because they, you know how it's weird because in the BOP, everybody hates the DC guys. Everybody, every facility, everywhere knows the DC guys are the absolute worst inmates in the world.
They got a horrible reputation.
Oh, it's the worst, bro. Even in Memphis. I mean, I don't know, how far is it? 800-900 miles away from DC, dude? And there's guys in there like, man, I will never go to a place that's got any DC people. You know what I mean? And I'm like, they freaking love us, dude. So there's a better story about that when we ended up in Philly with when I was with Rob in Philly, but I'll keep it short with Kenny. We went to Philly. So we're driving on this bus. We have no idea where we're going. Next thing you know, man, we know we're driving. We thought we were going to get on an airplane. I'm like, where are they going to send us? You know, they got to send us somewhere. And so, boom, we end up in Lewisburg. Man, when you're pulling into Lewisburg, and I don't think you ever went there, but
No.
that place is scary, man. This place was built in 1932. It's got like 29 to 30 foot high walls. They're like stone walls with gun terrace on the top of them. Okay.
It's like Shawshank Redemption. You get that feeling there?
No, really, but even more crazy because there's nothing around it for acres and acres. So it's this, and it's on top of a hill. So it's like there's a big sign out in the front as you pull down the road. It says, "Welcome to the big house."
The big house.
And dude, I'm telling you, and you look out that window, and I looked at Kenny, and I'm like, oh fuck. I'm like, this is not good. Dude, this place was ominous. I mean, it was bad looking. I'm like, oh, this is not good at all. I mean, it's a penitentiary. It's not a bullshit place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm like, so they they freaking pull up to the walls. The gates open. We go in. Boom. They bring us out of the thing, and we know we're at Lewisburg now, obviously. And when you get out of the bus at Lewisburg, there's a set of stairs that goes down into like the dungeon area, which I guess every jail has one or whatever. You know, at least I know underneath the DC court it does have one. So
yeah,
but it's an area kind of like that. But the difference between this and something I've never experienced before, when you walk in, there's these 2.5 by 2.5 cages, and they stick you in these cages. The first thing you do is you go in the cages, they lock the cages. So there's 50 dudes standing in these cages all around the room. And they start calling names. And one by one, these guys go out. One by one, one by one, one by one. And the next thing you know, it's me and Kenny. And I'm like, oh, man, this ain't good. We're last, you know.
Yeah.
So they get us out. And we go out there, and it was the reception area, and they kind of check in. They take your picture, measure your height, weight, all that good stuff, take your vitals, things like, you know how the routine is. But so they do all this stuff, and the guy that's taking our pictures goes, "You're on my unit, so you'll be okay." We got all the other Jan 6 guys up there. So I'm like, okay, well, that's a breath of fresh air, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a little something that's good. So We walk through, and I mean, this place is trashed. I mean, there is shit everywhere. I mean, I'm not literal, but garbage, and the walls got holes in them, the wiring's hanging down. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a rough stint. You know what I mean? This is going to be bad.
Yeah.
And then they took us over to medical. We walked through the medical hallway and up a flight of stairs, and then the door opened, and we're in this hall. It was like, I don't know if you've ever been on that ride at Harry Potter at Disney World, man, but this thing was insane, dude. The polished marble floors with paintings on the walls and 40-foot vaulted ceilings. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. It was beautiful. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, this is amazing in here.
Yeah.
And then the way they're set up is there's a big giant hallway that runs down the whole length of the prison. And then off of each, I don't know, every 100 feet or 200 feet, there's a big giant steel gate. And that gate opens into the units. The way the units are set up is they're 3 stories high. And I'm going to say there's 24 cells per level. You know what I mean? So, long story short, the bottom floors in most of the units were not occupied because they're flooded out. There's like, you understand, Lewisburg is so old, built in the 1930s, like I said. The windows are missing in some of the cells, and they actually have windows. They have no heat, no air conditioning. So you're kind of to the elements. Their heating system is a giant pipe that runs through the corner of your cell. The DC cells were probably 6 by 8. These were probably 5 by 9, maybe. They were a little thinner, but they were also a little bit longer. So it was more of a tight spot. Yeah. So when we got there, though, we came in, went upstairs, and there were the Jan 6 guys. You know, Rob Morris, Andrew Taki, Barry Ramey, Scooter, a bunch of the guys. I mean, just, you talk about it, Marcus Malley, just open arms guys. James Grant, they were just like, dude, what do you need? You need this. They introduced us to the other guys that were there in that unit. See, this wasn't just a GN6 unit now. Now we're sharing unit with the other 2 cars that are in prisons. You know, you have the white car, you have the Spanish car, you have the black car. They introduced us all these black car guys. They introduced all the Spanish car guys. And, man, it was really weird because everybody got along. It was totally cool. There was segregation just like everywhere else. But at the same time, everybody got along. The weirdest thing about that place was just how old it was. It was just so old. They actually filmed the movie Goodfellas when they're downstairs in the prison and they're like shaving the garlic with the razor blade.
That's where that was, huh?
That was filmed in Lewisburg, yes.
I was watching that in prison on Fort Dix.
I watched it in prison where it was filmed, so that was kind of cool. That was
Good
really
job.
Cool. Yeah. So that was a crazy experience there, and then we had a great Bible study group. Their rec yard is amazing. They have outdoor weight sets. They have an indoor weight room that would put any Gold's Gym to shame. Truly a great facility. The food was unbelievable coming out of DC, though. Let me tell you, because you know how bad DC was.
Oh yeah,
DC. They were trying to poison us and kill us and deficient us all the way down, right?
I bet. Yeah, man. I dropped 10 pounds immediately when I went to BOP, just because the food had so much less soy and fillers and shit. Like just immediately, it just dropped right off me. Real meat, mostly. I mean, it was a huge change.
Well, when I went to Lewisburg, they had a culinary program there that apparently had gotten canceled out, so it wasn't there anymore. But they had like 4 or 5 guys who were like chefs in the culinary program that were lifers. So they were there, and they were still running the kitchen. Yeah. And I'm telling you, man, I'm talking about freaking roast beef with gravy with mushrooms in it. I mean, it was good. You know what I mean? Yeah. Every meal we got 2 trays. You got a cold tray and a hot tray, except for breakfast. But you got a cold tray with your salad, dessert, and slaw or something like that on it, or fruit, whatever it was. And then the other tray was your hot tray. You know, it was really amazing, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, man, this is unbelievable. So after I got over that shock, you know, Did a lot of work on my case there as far as case law and stuff. They had a little bit better access to case law than we did in D.C. since we had zero case law access.
Yeah.
Until we got the clear tablet, and even then it was hard to navigate sometimes. But actually being on a physical computer for the first time in two and a half years was nice to be able to look up some case law and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where I really realized how bad my judge had done me. Or was getting ready to do me.
I bet. We had I think in DC we had Fast Case, which is awful.
Yeah.
And when I got to Fort Dix, I'm sure it was probably the same across BOP, but I finally got access to LexisNexis, or at least a version of it. Is that what you had?
Yeah, that's what we had.
LexisNexis. Yeah.
So then you were gone by now. So what happened was we were there for 2 months, and then all of a sudden, they come down the run. They're like, Meggs, Harrelson, Rhodes, you guys need to pack out. And there they do it like humans, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They take you downstairs, you pack your stuff out, keep what you need for the next 2 days, you're leaving in 2 days. So we keep what we needed for the next 2 days.
Mm.
And then that way we knew we were rolling out, you know what I mean? So we knew we were going. We had our stuff packed out. I had a tablet at that point, so I could watch a movie. I think I watched one movie in Lewisburg. And then we were ready to go. But that's when I kind of reconnected with Rob Morris, and that's when we started – I don't think we started talking about the book. It's just when we were talking about stuff that led to us writing the book. Mm. So that was kind of a cool thing. But then we got shipped to – we left I can't remember. I think it was a Thursday. I think we left on a Thursday. And they took us out and – they drove us back to D.C. I'm like, okay, now we're back in D.C. Well, when you go back to D.C., they're still doing quarantine. So I got to go to South 1 in the hole.
And this is mid-2023? They're still doing it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is May 23. So May of 23, I'm in the hole for a week. Now, the only good news now is, this is the difference now. Now, when you walk in the front door of DC, they hand you a black tablet. You check it in your name.
Yeah, I had heard you can make calls on them now directly. That was one of the big things we used to complain that, like, the regular jail, they have that app where they can make phone calls on the tablet. And that's the same every other jail I was at before DC. You could make calls on the tablets. And that was always a function, but I think the marshals would always say, "Oh, well, the contract doesn't allow for it," or something like that. But I guess they changed it.
Realistically, you can lock me down. You can lock me down 24 hours a day for a week. I don't give a damn, as long as I can call my family and make sure they're okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really all that matters to me. And it's funny that I say that because I think most people are like, solitary confinement is horrible. It's terrible. It is, but you get used to it. It's not hard to deal with. And as long as I can make my phone call, I'm okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because all I care about my family. I don't care about going out and watching TV or playing basketball or, shooting the shit in the day room and playing cards. I don't care. I'm fine with that. I want to talk to my family and make sure everybody's okay at home. That's the main thing.
Yeah, towards the end of my time in there, perfectly frank, I was happy to stay in my cell most of the time anyway, just so I could avoid some of the scumbags.
Yeah, there's just, you start getting drama. And unfortunately, the more time that went on, it's like more people became part of the agitator crowd. Even guys that weren't were like, they would still be cool with you and everything, but they were still hanging out with the guys that were bad elements in there, or what I like to say is bad elements. And I understand they were getting paid. Hey, man, hang out with me. I'm going to put $500 on your books, My dad will put it on there for you. It's cool. Yeah. But
my dad.
Yeah. Hey, literally, it was like, hey, man, if you if you could do this, man, my dad will put some money in your books. I'm like, no, dude, I'm good. I'm fine. I got family outside. I'm good. You know what I mean? I'm not interested. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to play the games in there. So we get back to DC. I do my week down there, and then I come out and I go to the unit back in C2B. They roll us in, me and Stuart. There's a bunch of new guys. Some of the old faces are there, So it was great to see some of the guys again. Billy Cressman stole my number 9 cell, so I was out on that.
Wow.
But, yeah, I had to go upstairs to. I don't remember the number, but it was Nate's old cell, so I took that one, and I got comfortable. Got me an extra mat, so I had 2 mats. I was living the life, guys all, you know how they do it when you come in there. Everybody gives you some commissary and a cup and coffee and this, that, and the other. And so I'm like, all right, I guess I'll go down and order my commissary. So I go down and order commissary. I had $265 on my book still. So I'm like, cool, I still got money on my books here. Boom, boom, boom. I order my commissary and everything. Next morning, we go to court and for our sentencing. We go down for sentencing. I get my 12 years, come back after that long ass day that was. Come back to the unit, and we're like, you know how it is when you go to court, you get back to the unit, you're like, I'm back home. You know what I mean? I can relax again.
Right.
No more shackles and chains. No more riding in the dog catcher van. That was the best, wasn't it?
The dog catcher.
The dog catcher van. I hated that. So, go back up to the unit, and they come and knock on the doors again and say, all right, you guys need to pack out. You're leaving.
Jesus.
I'm like, what? And they're like, yep, you're going.
Right back to BOP?
I know. I'm like, where are we going? We just got sentenced today. And they're like, no, you're being moved. I'm like, well, where the hell are we being moved? Boom, right into the hole. Yep, they took me and Stuart to the hole that night.
What was the reasoning for that?
They said we were a threat to be around other people in the unit because we had terrorism enhancements. So
okay,
it was Landerkin.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
I'm like, listen, there's a guy on the unit right now who got a fucking terrorism enhancement. So don't tell me that.
Yeah, not for nothing. They have literal murderers in the jail. In the
units.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Absolutely.
I want to double back actually because I feel like this is pretty important because you got one of the most egregious sentences even amongst some of the Oath Keeper cases. So I mean, like, you got the 12 years. This is maybe a stupid question. I'm sure it is, but I just got to ask: how did that feel? How did that feel? Okay, what I should say is, what was going through your mind? I'm sure you had an expectation. Worst case scenario, best case scenario, you get that verdict handed down by Meta. What happens? Like, you're standing there, and from that point on, when you get back, like, what's going through your mind all day? I know you came back and you said sort of like there's that, I'm back home feeling, but really, like, you must have had a lot going through your mind, I'm sure.
Well, first of all, during the sentencing, I knew Stuart got 18.
Yeah.
And I had 6 pages of motherfuck you. You know what I mean? I really did. That's exactly what I was going to say. It was going to be a brutal attack on what a shitty judge he is. That's exactly what my whole thing was going to be about. And I was going to call him out on all the bullshit that he allowed in our trial, how he was giving us bullshit enhancements that are illegal and unconstitutional, and you know it is, and you're doing it anyway. Because I had done my law research in Lewisburg. I knew I was telling the truth. I knew what I was talking about, and I knew he knew what I was talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really had my guns loaded that, like, hey, this is what I'm going to say. This is what I'm going to do. Stuart got 18 years, and when Stuart came down, I'm like, hey, man, what'd you get, bro? What'd you get back? He goes, 18 years. I'm like, what? He's like, I got 18 years. Dude, that is the moment. I'm in one of the dungeon cells downstairs. Stuart walks down and says he got 18. And I'm like, oh, my God. They're going to kill me. I'm like, it's over. I'm like, there's no way, right? So 2 seconds later, like, Meggs, come on, you're going up. I'm like, okay, let's go. We get up there, and I'm in the holding cell right outside the courtroom, and my attorney comes in, and he goes, I know that everything you wrote down is right. But if you ever want to see your family again, you better take that piece of paper and you better throw in that toilet over there.
Plan B.
And he goes, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just letting you make that decision right now. And I said, okay, I get it. So in my mind, I altered a few things, and then I ad-libbed a few things, and tried to more like lessen the blow, I guess, is all I was going for at that point. I don't think there was no chance that I was going to get what I thought I was going to get walking into this, because you know me and Padilla had talked for days about the administration of justice enhancements that they applied to us were unconstitutional. We knew they were.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that the administration of justice applies to is something in a court of law. And these 11 points of enhancements that he was giving me can't apply to Congress. It's a different branch of government. It's not covered, under the separation of powers. It doesn't include that.
Yeah.
And he knew that. He knew that was my argument the previous day in our pre-sentencing hearing, right?
Yeah.
He knew that was my argument. He knew that he was still going to give them to me, even though it was unconstitutional. And he did. You know what I'm saying? So, and in his crazy-ass lunatic mind, corrupt mind, I guess I should say.
Corruptly, yes.
He thinks he cut me a break.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and so I don't know if you've seen the video of that dude in, I think it was in Nevada, where he was at his bond hearing, and the judge is like, you're not getting any bond. You need to learn a lesson. And the dude leaps over the freaking stand at the judge.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay, that was my first thought. No, I'm kidding. That was not my first.
Disavow. I disavow.
No, I'm just kidding. No, but I definitely understand that guy's position. You know what I'm saying? No, it was crazy. I was like, this guy's doing something unconstitutional. He knows he's doing something unconstitutional. We brought it to his attention that it's unconstitutional, and he's doing it anyway.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, not for nothing, too. Like, the way it works, especially like the PSIs or the pre-sentencing reports, is like the government requests an insane fucking sentence. You request a reasonable one, and the judge basically splits the difference, but you still end up with an insane sentence. It's like, they want 1,000 years. Well, I only gave you 500, so clearly I cut you a break.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I'm okay. Listen, I'm okay with a PSR if when the PSR is presented to you, it's argued and it's justified at the time that this shouldn't be on the PSR. But that's not an opportunity you ever get. Your opportunity to argue that is basically the minute before you get sentenced, if you have a normal case, or like ours, we had an entire show. We had a whole nother show trial in our sentencing hearing because we had Capitol police officers in full dress. We had the little girl who carried the ballots and how we stole the democracy. She gave that story again. They did a recap of our trial, basically.
Mm.
The only thing, I don't think they brought the guns in the room again, but they may have. Random guns. They weren't ours. They weren't our guns, but they brought guns. They could have had guns like this, you know what I mean? So
bring in a severed head just because.
Yeah, if they would have killed someone, this is what it would look like. Right. That's exactly what they were doing. And so ultimately, I knew once Stewart got hammered, I was like, man, I better change course. And so I did. I dropped off a lot of the accusations and stuff. I did quote a little bit of case law that he had ignored. And then I used Dunn against himself almost. He insisted on being there for sentencing because it was so important to him, right? Mm. He's a totally different story I'll get into in a second. But I looked at him and I'm like, I saw you on video and you really did a lot that day. And if I in any way thought that we were going to be intimidating you, we wouldn't have helped you. Basically that's what I said. And
I'm sorry I helped you.
No, they freaked out because I pointed at him. You can't point at a witness. I'm like, he's not testifying today. You know what I mean? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? They're like, just stay facing the judge. Do not turn around. I'm like, yeah, the marshals thought I was like pointing him out to have him assassinated or something. I'm like, no,
Jesus Christ.
I'm just acknowledging, the guy. You know what I mean? They freaked out like crazy. You know what I mean? And then that's what the guy explained to me back there. He's like, the reason we freak out is because a lot of times people will point to people in the courtroom because that's who they're supposed to, someone in the room is supposed to take care of. I'm like, what? Are you people crazy?
That's why you're here.
Yeah, I'm like, are you nuts? It doesn't work like that in the real world. You watch too many movies, man. So anyway, I get my sentencing, and my family's there. I'm bawling like a little girl. You know what I mean? What are you going to do when somebody gives you 12 years for something you didn't do?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hard part about it, Tim. Look, I'll take my blows for anything I've ever done in my life. I am not a saint by any means, and I'm not here to proclaim sainthood. You know what I mean? I'm not, and I own up to everything I've done in my life. A lot of good, a lot of bad. You know what I mean? I try to make sure the good's more than the bad. But there was nothing, not one thing on January 6th I did that I can honestly say could even be construed as bad.
Yeah.
In any way. There was no, like, ooh, look, I got away with pushing a door open. Nope, it was already open when I got there. Oh, I could have pushed this officer down, but I didn't. You know what I mean? No, I was nowhere near anything like that, So it was a situation where here I am getting 12 years. And so now my mindset goes from like, okay, I've done my 2.5 years. I've done my 3 years almost. And maybe the judge will let me out. Maybe he'll just give me 3 years and I can go home, or 4 years and I won't have much more time and I can be home. It'll be great. To, okay, I just got 12 years. You know what I mean? It's like, it'll get fixed on appeal. We'll fix this on appeal. I'm not going to be in that long. Your mind always, like for me, my mind always searches for the best option, the best possibility, or the best possible outcome.
Right.
I'm not the guy that's going to sit there and go, oh my God, I got to do 144 months. That's,
Yeah. Don't panic. Don't panic. We haven't exhausted every option. We can still do this. We still got that.
Yeah, and my attorney's like, don't worry, we still got the Supreme Court. I'm like, oh my God, what, you're talking years, man. I'm like, let's get the appellate court to make a decision here. You know what I mean? But then we started seeing it, So I get sentenced. I go back to the jail. Obviously, I'm just crushed. I mean, like, crushed beyond belief. My family, it's the best. I will tell you the best phone call I had with my wife the whole time that I was in prison. And that was the night I got back from prison, or night from sentencing. And I called my wife, and she said, I don't care how long you're gone, I'm going to stand by you the whole time. And that was fucking badass on her part, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was the best call I've ever had on the phone in prison, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not everybody was that lucky, That's
No. Listen.
Yeah.
The women were trying. I said, I'm the luckiest guy because my wife got busted too. You know what I mean? She knew the hell I was going through, I mean, it's crazy too because she had less to do with this than I did. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, she has no clue. She's along for the ride. She made sandwiches. That was her crime, And it was like, it really was. I was like, we don't do sandwiches. We bring cheeseburgers from McDonald's. That's what we do. She's like, well, I made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches,
She's an extreme homemaker.
Exactly. She's an extremist homemaker. She's truly a domestic terrorist, right? You know what I'm saying? So that's what she did. And so as much as I can say I was fortunate that happened, I feel terrible that it put her through the same thing. But in the end, I think in the end it helped us because we are constantly joking about prison shit. You know what I mean? I mean, she's like, "Oh, today's Tuesday. Are we having chicken patties?" You know what I mean? It's like, so she better not start like today. What's today? What is today? What day is it? What day is it?
Today's Wednesday, yeah.
You are not going to believe what I had for dinner. We had hamburgers.
Wait. They put mayonnaise on their burger. That's an enhancement.
Yes, and they were Angus burgers from Publix, so that was a lot better. Trust me, it's one of the best burgers I've had in years. So I told her, I was like, "This is the best burger I've had in 4 years." So
Yeah.
it's not a compliment, but it was good. But it's funny because I don't even think she realized that she made burgers on Wednesday, and that's for those of people that don't know that's what you eat on Wednesdays in prison. So it's just a rule.
Yeah.
So we call it White Boy Wednesday. So get your hamburger. But so yeah, she was with me the whole time. She stuck through it all with me, and that's something that I can't say. Like gosh, I'd like to say half the men lost their wives, but I think the number's probably closer to 75-80%.
Yeah.
I mean, of all the people that we did time with, there's not many of them left. I mean, Webster's wife stayed, Kenny's wife stayed, my wife stayed, and I think that's about it out of the 40 dudes. That's a pretty bad number. I know we had half of them were probably single, but I mean, even the guys that had girlfriends bailed. All the girlfriends bailed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even the ones that were super supportive in the beginning ended up bailing because they figured out their boyfriends were jackasses. So,
Oh, gee, I wonder. What's funny is like I a couple of the guys in there had done time before, and they actually kind of like it just didn't really affect me. But it did. It was quite prescient, it was very clairvoyant. Like they were basically like, you just watch. Half these guys are going to lose their girl because that's just how it is. Not even because it's J6, just because it's just a thing, that.
Well, it's time away. I mean, I understand you can't. Time doesn't stop out here.
Sure.
Different. When you go to prison, time stops.
Yeah.
Like I remember things. I literally came home and I'm like, where did all these clothes come from? Oh my God. You know what I mean? I freaked out. The first time I walked in my house, I freaked. You don't understand. I can tell you right now, anybody listening to this, at least to the end, because I know it's long, the freaking shock that it is to come out of prison and to come back home is way worse than the 4 years in prison. And I mean, you're military, I've talked to Rob. I've talked to Jeff. I've talked to Dan. I've talked to Ryan. These guys are Marines. These guys are Special Forces. These guys are Rangers. These guys aren't like, National Guard guys. I mean, these guys were in the shit. They went to Iraq. They went to Afghanistan. They did tours. They've got PTSD. They know what it's all about. And you know what they all say? This is worse. And I don't know if it's worse because of the fact that you missed 4 years. It's gone. You know what I mean? And I think when you're in the military, and even though you're in combat or you're in action or you're deployed or whatever you're doing, you still have a certain grasp of freedom. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you have a purpose, and you're part of a bigger machine. And it's like, and I'll say this too, like when you're in the jail, when you're locked up, it's like you're isolated, but I don't know, you're surrounded by other people, I guess, and so you build that camaraderie and stuff. That's why, like, I asked that question before, because it's so important. Even though we were in the shit, we still had people who were also in the shit. But when you get out, even like when you get out of basic training, it's like, how do you adjust? Because it's just you're not plugged into what you were plugged into before you left.
Right.
You like that being unplugged. It's almost like the Matrix. Like when you realize that like everything around you is not what it is. It's just like you just feel isolated. Like the entire world is going on around you, but you're not a part of it. Or at least you don't feel like you are. It's very weird.
Yeah, it's like one of the things I've never had. I mean, like I have a back patio and it's nice, but it's covered. and screened in pool, right? So patio table goes in the driveway. Like, I'm on 5 acres, so my driveway is long as hell. It's 2 football fields long, whatever. I put my patio table out in front of my garage in the driveway, and that's where I sit all day.
Not
outside.
bad.
I don't sit in the house. You will not catch me sitting in the house hardly at all. This is probably the longest I've been inside since I've been out. And so that's the hard part. That's really the hard part. And I didn't even really get into Memphis. Memphis was a blur. When I went to Memphis, I went to Philly with Rob. After my sentencing, I sat in the hole for a month and a half, getting back to the story. And then they came and grabbed me one morning and said, "You're leaving." They took me down, and I sat there, and Lego came out, Rob Morris, and we ended up going together to Philly, and we were there for 2 months. And it's like, we were playing chess. We were talking about the strategy and the moves, and that's when we decided we better write this down, because he had some stuff from the military that was bothering him. And we just started rolling. I mean, I told him, I said, "Look, I'm not a writer." I said, I'm a talker, so I'll talk all you want. And he's like, "No, you talk, I'll write it down. You talk, I'll write it down." So he kept writing, and I kept talking. And within, I don't even know, it was probably a week, maybe 2 weeks, we had that thing pretty much done, other than, having it smuggled out. I mean, we had to, listen, they were checking our mail like crazy.
Yeah.
So anything we sent out was very hard to send out. I'm not going to tell you how we got it out of there, but let's just say it wasn't a guard, and it didn't go out with us. You know what I mean? So we got that we got it out of the prison, and we made 3. The hard part is we made 3 copies. And you know how you make copies in prison?
Well, either in the library or by hand.
There is no library in Philly, so by hand.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to leave the unit in Philly. So it was a hand rewrite 3 times.
That reminds me of the Hopium Den. It reminds me of the Hopium Den, and me and Morris made like 10 copies of each script just so nobody would get lost during the fucking the skits.
Right. Because Morris is a lot of different things. But Morris is a detailed nut, man. He really is when it comes down to stuff like that. So we wrote that thing, and I honestly would have never written another book, because I really thought we had covered so much in that. But when Trump got shot, I was like, there was so much that was happening at that time. I was actually talking to Rebecca Terrell from the New American. She's a magazine, and she did an article on me when I first got to Memphis, and then I wrote an article for the 4th of July, pretty much about patriotism and stuff like that, right? And then they published that. So I sent her a bunch of letters that she was probably just going to publish on a website or something, and we started talking, and we're like, I might make this into a book. And she's like, "Yeah, I publish books all the time. It's easy." I'm like, "Oh, well, maybe we should just take all these notes and turn them into a freaking book, And she's like, "I'll type it all real quick," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's funny because she can't read my handwriting, so a lot of stuff, like, you'll be reading a sentence and it'll be like, we were marching up to the Capitol and we had a cake. And it's like, what? What's that? And it's like, she couldn't read my word. You know what I mean? So there are some mistakes in there, but, I guess she spell checked it all and it was fine. But
wait, so chronologically, your first book, actually, the Fight, that actually chronologically was written second then.
Yeah, because Rob, we smuggled this book out. It's got to go through a couple channels to get to where its ultimate goal is to get to, right? So it finally gets where it's supposed to go. They're going to put it into a print format so that it can actually be used to make a book out of it. Then they're going to add the editor, the little, what do they call it? I don't even know what they're called. The notes down at the bottom, the notes section.
Yeah.
Where
citations.
You're backing up your your actual facts or whatever you're claiming. It's being backed up with evidence, right?
Sure.
So, fortunately, Rebecca did all that for me, so I didn't have to bother with that nonsense. But the other people had to do it themselves. And then it got to be, I was moving, he was moving, we didn't know what was going on. And then finally, Rob got out and grabbed it, and it's like, okay, I think we're just going to drop it on January 6th. And I'm like, no, not a good time. We need to get this out faster, because a lot of this has to do with, making sure that Trump gets elected, and we missed that vote. It's over now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really why I wrote. That's why I really wanted to write all these things that I wrote in Fight, 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 was because Fight, Fight, Fight was more about all the stuff going on right now and why you need to see through all the Democrat bullshit and understand what the real story is. That's really the whole purpose of that book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why do we need RFK? Because of forget about the vaccines, forget about the damn health department, forget about all that shit. Look at the food manufacturers, and you will know why America's getting sick. Okay? So I sat there from memory and made a list of as many as I could think of. And then I had to do what every good prisoner does when they have to look something up, when it absolutely has to. I would give a bag of coffee for a half an hour on a phone. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I looked up a couple things and filled in the blanks. But, when Monsanto, one of the largest seed and food producers in the world, buys Bayer Pharmaceuticals, which is the largest drug manufacturer and chemotherapy drug maker in the world, there's a conflict of interest there.
A little bit.
Why wasn't this ever investigated? Why wasn't this brought before Congress? Like, hey, it's not really good to be doing this. You know what I mean? Like, you guys are making the food, making people sick, and then you're treating them. And it's like, now I ask you this, how many people in the world, and everybody, there's a lot of people going to raise your hand, I'm sure, but how many people in the world aren't going to be corrupted by that? The opportunity to say, well, okay, so we give a couple people allergies, big deal. You know what I mean? You don't hurt anybody. Or we make a couple people a little more obese than, they need to be.
Just a little
by
bit.
adding extra sugars or extra, chemicals into the food. I mean, but you get to sell more drugs, you get to sell more allergy medicines, you get to sell all that stuff. Yeah. And you make the food addictive so that people want more of it.
Yeah.
So,
and even if it's, conflict of interest, or, I mean, really, from my personal opinion, like, I like free enterprise, but at the end of the day, there's a reason we have antitrust laws and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it becomes a corruptive. If too much of our industry is focused in the hands of so few, it ends up becoming corruptive. It actually ends up poisoning the market itself. Yeah,
exactly. And as much as we all hate the fact that Walmart's so big and that Amazon is so big, they actually keep each other honest. I mean, realistically, you know what I mean? So it's not a bad thing to have multiple facets or multiple outlets to get everything. But when you have a drug company buying all of the food manufacturing companies, or the majority of them, there's an issue there. It really is. And I think that's something that I'm hoping that, RFK really investigates that. And that's just one of the things I talk about. I mean, but that book really, like I said, it was just it was a whim. It was me sitting in my cell in the afternoons, because I hate sitting in the day room. So I would sit in my cell and just write and write and write and write. And I finally said, once I filled up a whole notebook, I'm like, that's all we're getting. And I mailed it, so, yeah. And she got it literally within 2 weeks. That thing was gone, published out. We talked about changing the cover a couple times, but I'm like, it looks like I drew it in prison, so let's just leave it that way.
Well, I didn't want to say anything. No, that was.
I mean, I had crayons. What do you want?
Clip art Trump.
Well, I told her, I'm like, let's use the photo. She's like, let's just do a drawing. I'm like, oh, come on. You know what I mean? I'm like, all right, we'll do it. Let's go. So I just didn't know if there was some kind of royalties attached to it. But honestly, I mean, I didn't intend to write that book. That book just kind of happened real fast. And It did come out, like you said, a little bit earlier than the first book we wrote. So chronologically, yes, it's the second book. And then I wrote one when I was in C2B that's already 280 pages, and I just got out of C2A.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really big, and it's going to be everything that you've heard here today, plus an in detail breakdown of the trial, including manuscripts from the trial, or transcripts from the trial. So
yeah,
it's going to be pretty full. I mean, that's something that's not coming out anytime soon. You know, I heard Fairlamb's got a book coming out, so that's cool.
Yep.
I just saw that promoted the other day.
Yeah, I just saw that yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, he talked about it. We did a podcast together here in Jersey, and he had alluded to that as well. Yeah, I think the more people who do it, the better, because it's going to help. It's going to help with the historical record more than anything. Like, the damage is done with the false narratives and stuff, but nobody believes them anymore. But I do think there's still like a vacuum of information, a vacuum for information. And I think
there has to be. I think the problem is, until you get an official, here's the truth, like we're hopefully going to get tomorrow, because I heard they're going to drop the Epstein list. Until you get the truth, regardless of what people think, you still have the other half of the people who think that that's not the truth. So I think there has to be, at some point, there's going to have to be a reckoning where everything is proven, everything is shown, and this is exactly what happened. And I think that day's coming. I really do. I think that's why Kash Patel's where he's at, because he's been avidly involved in January 6th since the beginning. So I think that's where he's heading. I'm hoping that's where he's heading, because that's the only way I get rid of my damn felonies.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm hoping also that, I have a twofold desire. First is that I hope they finish just releasing all the damn CCTV, because they claim that they've finished. The House GOP's full of shit. They're still holding back CCTV, but I also hope they just release all the damn body cams, because none of that was ever under seal. And that's kind of why, like, my motivation for going to trial, and this is something I wanted to get, one of the last things I wanted to get out of you, is my motivation for going to trial, besides the fact that I was innocent, was that I wanted to put the government to its burden. And I feel like we all had narratives built around us, but by putting the government to its burden and forcing them to show what their quote-unquote evidence was, I thought that in the long run that would, from my perspective, I didn't know they would ever release any of the CCTV, because they have that Rumble page now, the House, where they release a lot of the CCTV. Tucker released some, Kevin McCarthy released some, but it's just like, at the time, there was none.
Stephen Baker's done a tremendous job on getting some out.
Yeah, and so, like, at the time, I was worried, like, nobody's ever going to learn the truth. And at least I wanted whatever they had, for me at least, I wanted that to become public record. You had people fighting, like the press corps, so they couldn't get the video. I understand, like, it could be framed for a certain narrative, but the more, from my perspective, the more video, the better. And so I guess what I want to ask you is that, what was your motivation, I guess, for going to trial? You had the option, and especially, like, I got convicted, Guy got convicted, Webster got convicted.
I knew what was coming. I knew it wasn't going to be pretty. I mean, I did think that we had a unique case. You know what I mean? I thought we had a case where I really thought we could win our case. At least, I don't think we could win it all, because I know that wasn't going to happen. I'm not stupid. You know what I mean? But I really thought we could beat the seditious conspiracy, because there's such a higher level of
burden.
Yeah, there's such a higher burden of proof for that charge. And I truly do not think they came anywhere near proving that, especially when they said that initially the plan was formed on November 9th, which was a phone call, Oath Keepers National call. They said that's when the plan was formed. And then once we proved that didn't happen in trial, they changed it to, well, Kelly Meggs told them all to do it. And then when two witnesses got on the stand, this is during trial. This is how it happened. You know what I mean? November 9th was the conspiracy. Then Kelly Meggs told me to go in the building when they stopped just before they got on Capitol grounds. 2 people testified that never happened. Their own witnesses. Okay. So now, then they changed it to they had a mental agreement on the stairs that this was their plan.
A mental agreement. Interesting.
I'm like, that is not even close to a seditious conspiracy.
A mental conspiracy.
Well, yeah, because the judge made sure he went out of his way to explain that even if we thought about this crime, it could be construed as a crime. It's called mens rea, and that's your mental state.
Yeah, the guilty mind.
And he explained to the jury how your mens rea, your mindset, could automatically convict you. And that's where, basically reading the jury instructions, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's not good. He just basically threw out every defense we ever had. I mean, every witness we put on the stand. So, they had a big chart with all these heads on it. And they had my head and Stuart Rhodes' head and Kenny's and Jess, all these heads, right?
Yeah.
And they had a big chart like, it looked like the crime scene, when they got it on the wall in the FBI office and they're connecting all the strings,
Well, I remember being in the jail. I worked on my case. Padilla worked on his case, and then Pete, the Oath Keepers, Dan. But the Oath Keepers were constantly. When we finally had access to some of the video, you guys were just all nonstop all day taking notes and everything. And I remember we'd go through the slides and stuff, and you'd have they broke it down by stack 1, stack 2, and color coded and all these meticulous maps of the entire district. And I'm like, holy shit, they're really trying to make this into it was insane. It was like I was watching the Battle of Guadalcanal on the History Channel or something like that. I'm like, it's damn, how much money did they pour into this? It's crazy.
Oh, I bet they spent easily $2-3 million on our trial alone, and that's not even including their freaking attorneys.
Yeah.
But so I told my attorney. My attorney was not in agreement with this all, right? So the whole time I had planned on testifying, and he was begging me not to testify. He's like, don't testify, because all they're going to do is show all your slides again, and when they show all your slides again, you're just going to get in an argument with them, and they're going to show all your slides again. And I'm like, I don't care if they show my slides again. I'm hiding nothing. You know what I mean? So I did get him, I convinced him right at the end that I want to make my own board. I want a big board, and I want the prosecutors at the top. And underneath that, I want the FBI agents that are all lying, and I want the Capitol Police that are lying, and I want to tie it all together, and I want to make it all look really nice and good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through, and we're going to quote things, and we're going to have these stickers that say no plan. And we did this. So we got our board up there. He wouldn't let me put their pictures up there. He said that wasn't very polite to do that. And I said, well, they put mine up there. So
now, Meggs, the prosecutor is an officer of the court. You need to show respect.
Yeah, sure. So we went through each one. We're like, Kate Riccozzi, prosecutor, sends an email on this date. You're not allowed to enter that email and thing. Anyway, no plan. Boom, he smacked the no plan sticker on her. We go through every single one of their witnesses. And I had the crucial thing. When we were doing our trial, I told my attorney, I said, I want you to take this witness right now. I said, you're getting ready to cross him. Because the benefit we had was we had 5 crosses. So when a witness spoke, every single attorney for each individual had an opportunity to cross-examine, right?
Yeah.
So Stanley chose to go last on the first guy. And I'm like, I want you to go up there. This guy's talked about, 30,000 videos, 40,000 text messages, 16,000 different threads and all this shit and phone conversations recorded and, all these phones you've confiscated. But I want you to ask him one simple question. In all of that research you did, was there ever a plan to stop the certification or go in the Capitol. So that was the first thing we asked. Their best witness, their main FBI guy who had covered the whole trial, he basically spent 3 days on the stand. Our first cross-examination question to him was, everybody else had gone and asked all these different questions. And my attorney stood up and said, boom, 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 did his own little things. And then right at the end, he goes, let me ask you a question. You said you went through this many emails? He's like, yep. And you went through this many chats? Yep. And all these phone calls? Yep. And he goes, but not one time did you see a plan to enter the Capitol or stop the certification, did you? Well, they didn't exactly say it, but I mean, no one's actually going to say it. And he goes, so you're saying there was actually no actual plan. You never saw that. And he's like, no, I never actually saw a plan. Thank you. And that was it. So
Shocking.
It crushed the day for them.
Yeah.
It was over. Like they could have just thrown their 3 days away with this dude, basically. So that became my attorney. I'm like, that's every time someone gets on that stand, that's what you ask them. Because I was fighting seditious conspiracy. I wasn't fighting the 1512. I didn't give a damn about obstruction. 3 years, whatever it means.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm arguing 2.5. Let's get rid of the big one,
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you. Jesus could have came down through the courtroom, struck all the defendants dead, and told these people we didn't do it. And they would have said, yes, you did.
Yeah.
Because they didn't care.
No,
they were already pre-programmed, predetermined, and
Well, I remember when they were doing those Jan 6 hearings in D.C., they were name dropping all of you, and they even had those big I guess they were like big screen TVs. They just set them up all throughout D.C. and they were just playing those hearings. They wanted to. I mean, keep in mind, D.C. was already corrupt in terms of prejudiced potential jury pool, but they really wanted as prejudiced a jury as they could possibly get. There's no way around it.
They were showing our names, our text messages, all this crap.
Yeah.
On TV the night before our trial. I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
And this is the most greatest jury pool ever. I'm like, come on, this is ridiculous.
Oh yeah. And
but you know what? I've been through a lot in 4 years, and I can tell you, they've stripped me down, literally, physically, financially. But what they did in the last 7 months to me is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I haven't shared this with anybody, so I'm going to give you something that no one else has ever heard me say. On December 31st of last year, my daughter, who lives with us, and she has 3 grandkids. Carson's 14 now. Jenna's 6 now, and Ava's 2 now. Ava was born when I was incarcerated, so I had never seen her before until I got home. So,
yeah.
And actually, Ava was born on my mom's birthday, who had passed away in 18, so that was kind of cool. But on December 31st of last year, not this one that just passed, the year before, 23, sorry.
Yeah.
It was December 31st, and it's New Year's Eve, right? So my daughter had a bottle of wine and, was hanging out at her house, which they do every night. And she has early onset Crohn's, and she has some diverticulitis stuff that goes on. So she had an attack. She was super bad. So she called the paramedics. Paramedics come to the house, and they start to take my daughter away. And my daughter is talking to the cop that's there, because the cop shows up too.
Yeah.
And says, look, my son is 13 at the time. Sorry. He's 13. Is he old enough to take care of the 2 girls until the morning? And this is 11:30, midnight, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And he's like, they're sleeping. It doesn't matter. Yes, he's fine. You know what I mean? So they take her, and everything's good. Well, the next morning, my daughter gets released from the hospital at 9:30. At 9 o'clock, DCF is in my home taking the children.
What the fuck?
They took the kids. They said it was her blood alcohol level, even though she had a panic attack, her blood alcohol level was high, so she's not fit to take the kids. And when they came in to do the home inspection, they went in my home, not my daughter's home. They came in my home, and I have 6 dogs.
Yeah.
And my dogs go out whenever the damn kids were doing it, because my wife was still in prison. My wife was put in prison on October 31st. She is the secondary caregiver of the children when my daughter has an issue, right? So my house is a mess. So they come in here, and there's dog poop on the floor and pee on the floor, right? You know what I mean? Which my daughter would have cleaned up the next day when she let the dogs out. That's just what she does. But she couldn't let them out that night because she was gone. So long story short, they take my grandkids, and they make my daughter go through some program bullshit, whatever it is. So they take my grandkids, and they tell my daughter, based on your medical condition, because now we're going to admit it's a medical condition, not an alcohol condition, right? Because my daughter went through the whole thing. She hasn't had a drink in 14 months, all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
We're going to give you the kids back as soon as your mother gets home from prison. That was in the end of June, the very end of June. The very end of June comes, my wife gets home. Okay, let's get the kids back. Oh, yeah, they'll be back in a couple of days. Don't worry. Everything's fine now. You're good. Well, now we wait in the end of July. What's going on with the kids? Oh, you guys should have them back at the end of July. No problem. You don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Well, we're arguing. We're doing our visitation, little bullshit like that. And it's elevating in frustration because we should have the kids back by now. And in September, the caseworker says to my wife, to my daughter, well, the reason the kids aren't home is because your mother is a domestic terrorist.
What the fuck? So, where were they keeping the kids, in foster care, or?
Yeah, they're in foster care. And so then that's what they're telling her, that your mother must have mental issues because she was in one of the January 6th Capitol people. And so we have to figure out that she's some kind of domestic terrorist or something. We're not sure what to do because she could be violent and extreme.
Oh man.
And we're worried that she's starting to, she's starting to
recidivism, like she's going to go back to a life of insurrection.
No, they were worried that she was affecting my daughter, and because my daughter was starting to try to fight for her kids. Like my daughter's like, "Where are my kids? How come my kids aren't back?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, well, you need to calm down. You know, of course you're going to be mad. They have your kids, right?
Yeah.
So then we get guaranteed. Okay, blah 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 blah. We're going to go ahead and end of October, guaranteed kids are going to be home. End of October comes, no kids. They tell her the kids can't come home. The kids can't come home because there's no home study. We have to have somebody come in, check the house, make sure it's all clean, make sure everything's good, make sure there's food, the normal shit they do, right? So the lady has come already 2 months earlier and done that when my wife was home.
Well, not for nothing. Wouldn't probation have already visited the house in preparation for her release?
Absolutely. And it was cleared. Okay? And the prison's not going to release someone that's mentally unstable into the community.
Right.
Right? Okay, so we know that already. So then in October, they say the home study's not done. They're still working on it. They'll let you know. I'm like, how does a home study take 2 months? It doesn't make any sense. Something's wrong. Plus, they're in people's homes that have homes that are $150,000, $200,000. I live in an $800,000 home, okay? My home is beautiful, okay? And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that these kids have 40 million toys. They have more food than they can ever eat.
Yeah,
it's not an issue with the home. The home is not the issue.
Yeah, it's not a shack in the swamp. It's not a fucking
right.
like it's not an outhouse. It's a house.
No. And it's a big house, and they love it here. There's a pool. There's the animals. I mean, there's everything here. So in October, she tells us, well, the home study's not done, and some of the higher ups are what's holding this up because they don't necessarily see politically like you guys do. And now this is the caseworker trying to kind of bridge a gap of like, I know you want your kids back, but yet upper management's saying you can't have them back, right?
Yeah, kind of dry snitching on the superiors who are clearly trying to fuck you.
But at the same time, we're trying to play the game because we know how this works. We're dealing with the government here. You know what I mean? So we know what we got to do. They want us to do something stupid so that they won't be able to give them back to us. That's what they're trying to shoot for, right?
Give them an excuse, yeah.
So then it's Thanksgiving, they don't get back. Then it's Christmas for sure, they don't get back. And now Donald Trump pardons us. And the lady calls my daughter and says, we're pretty sure that everything's clear, even with the home study. Now we're 6 months past the home study being done, right?
Yeah.
But they're still not filed. It's not filed in court yet. We're pretty much past that, but there's still this question with your mom. And my daughter goes, it's not a problem because she got pardoned. And they're like, oh, well, that's great. No big deal then. Boom. So everything's fine again, right? We get a call 2 days later, and they said, we need a copy of the pardon paperwork. And not just something that says she got pardoned. We want the actual copy of the certificate with the seal on it. These kids don't stay in my house. They stay in my daughter's house. It has nothing to do with us. And they're holding January 6th against us to keep our children from us.
I hate to, maybe a stupid question. I understand, DeSantis is not necessarily pro J6er, and, it's not Trump, technically, even though he lives in Florida.
He's not involved in anything. He's a pansy-ass nothing, is what DeSantis is.
So then, I mean, again, I know bureaucracy and government in general, there's always going to be, maybe
Tim,
not necessarily.
This was coming from way higher. Way higher.
Like state level, county level?
Way higher.
Huh.
Let me tell you something. If you don't think the feds can fuck with you now, you're wrong.
Yeah.
They can. And they were. This order came from way above anybody around here. And you know how I know that for a fact? Because I'm not stupid. As soon as I got out, I looked up everybody. I was on the intel team with our organization, right? I told you that earlier.
Yeah.
I immediately looked up every person that was involved in this organization that's running this. It's an NGO. It's not even Florida. It's an organization called Kid Central. So I looked up all the people in control of Kid Central. The manager of the branch here is not a leftist. So it ain't him.
Okay.
So it's coming from higher up than him.
Mm.
And I also found out last week that the home study was not only approved and done and ready to go in October, they were just dragging their feet on filing it so that they could steal the fucking money from the state of Florida for the last 3 months. Because they get paid by the state of Florida for handling the case.
I think I have the next target for Doge. Shit.
Absolutely. So they have been keeping my grandkids from my daughter for the last 8 months on some bullshit, made up stuff about January 6th. When we weren't even guilty of what we did on January 6th in the first place. Now, the good news is, suddenly, after January 20th, and pardon paperwork going over, everybody's fucking cooperating now. Everything's great. No big deal. Kids are going to be back next weekend, full time. They're coming for their a weekend overnight this time, and then next week they're full time back. Why? Why all of a sudden? So you're telling me that you've kept my freaking grandkids out of their house for the last 7 months because you're playing fucking politics with my grandkids?
Yeah, that kind of sudden shift. Yeah, it's got to be coming from the feds then.
That's what it is.
Because
you know it is.
I thought, because like, I mean,
and
again, I'm not
about this. I haven't said anything about this to anybody, anywhere, at any time, because I did not want to screw up the process.
Yeah.
Because I knew that we're going to have to play their damn game just to get through this.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you right now, that's something that the people in America need to know, and that we're going to sue the shit out of these people for the last 7 months of my grandkids' lives.
Absolutely. And that's just as valuable as the time we lost behind bars. You can't get that back. Not at all. And they can't get that time with you back or with their parents back. That's fucking insane. And
that bothers me more than give me 10 years of solitary confinement, but leave my damn family out of it.
I don't even know what to say to that. That's still insane. Like, again, like in the back of my head, I thought, like, I know Broward County, like I know, like during elections, there's always some funny business in blue counties in Florida, but I'm like, how petty could it be? Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like that, but I want to really know.
I live in the reddest county there is. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, now I really want to know who made that call. I want to see the communications that led to that.
Yeah, I mean, somebody somewhere, or was it this caseworker holding this shit out on her own?
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
because she is not in any way, shape, or form a fan.
Well, you had said that they sort of tried to like indicate it was coming from above and that it was political.
Well, she did.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they did.
So you think maybe she was just passing the buck to her superiors then?
I think she was probably telling them, well, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, so we can't approve them yet. We got to wait,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know what the story is, Tim. But I know my grandkids were approved to be back in this home. It was filed in October. It was done in June. So I know for a fact they should have been sometime between June and October. Those kids should have been back in this house.
Yeah, not half a year later. Yikes.
Right. They literally gave visitation to a father who didn't even know the kid, refused to have anything to do with the kid. It's insane what they've done.
Yeah. That is, I mean, I've seen a lot of crazy, I've heard a lot of horror stories the past few years, but that's one of the craziest I've heard so far. And thank God Trump got in. Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. First of all, Trump didn't get in. No, we're not talking right now, number one. You know what I mean? We're
Facts.
Every single one of us, their prosecutors asked for more time. And they would have probably gotten it in a lot of cases. That's the sad part.
Yeah.
I want everybody to understand that. Every single January 6th defendant that got sentenced, no matter how ridiculous you think the time was, the prosecution appealed the sentences and asked for more time. That's what our DOJ has been doing to a guy that got 12 freaking years for helping and assisting a cop. He got 12 years, and the DOJ, instead of going after the next case or finding these freaking people who are bringing fentanyl into our country, or finding some child molester who's got some kind of child pornography ring going on, they're going to spend all their time and effort making sure that they appeal my case so that I get 18 years instead of 12 for something I didn't even fucking do.
Yeah, still waiting for that apology letter.
I haven't got mine yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
Yeah. Well, on that note...
And I'm hoping that apology letter has a lot of zeros on it. So, but in the meantime, if anybody out there wants to hire me, I'm available.
I want one of those. I want one of those gold cards Trump's talking about. The green card, gold.
I just need one of those, and I'm good.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I want to give you the floor to discuss anything else you think that we didn't cover. I want you, Jess, and Kenny to come back again, and I plan on having you really all digging into the trial because that went on much like the Proud Boy trial. That thing went on basically for months. That's such a massive topic. I think it warrants its own thing. But in terms of what we discussed, if there's nothing we didn't address, I want to give you the floor to discuss anything you think the American public needs to know, not should know, deserves to know, but needs to know.
Well, I think the main thing they need to know is how corrupt the system was. I mean, I know we all had a feeling of it, and I think we're all seeing. I want you to understand something. As much as you think the Department of Justice and the judicial system in our country is corrupt, I want you to understand that that's what you think. And before Doge started diving into all of these agencies, you thought they were stealing a little bit of money here and there, right? But they're stealing billions of our dollars. And let me tell you something. The same exact thing is going on in the judicial system with sentences, with corruption, with them convicting innocent people of crimes they didn't do by slapping some bullshit conspiracy on them and just trying to wheel everybody in. And you have to understand that what Doge is exposing right now is fantastic from a financial aspect of it, but you have to understand that that same thing is going on across our government in not only the financial part of it, but the judicial part of it, the legislative part of it. We haven't even looked at like how many sweet deals did these legislators give guys, or how many rules were bent so that their buddies could get contracts. We haven't even started there. We haven't even looked at that yet. So, I mean, let's not even like look at Doge and go, wow, they're really doing a great job. Just open your mind a second and start wrapping it around all the other corruption that's not financial that could be occurring. Allowing drug makers to buy all the food companies in the United States. Just as one example. And it's a simple one. So that's what you need to start thinking about. And you have to understand something too. As much as I owe Donald Trump, which is literally my life at this point, we have to understand that this goes beyond Donald Trump. This isn't about Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a vessel that's being used by God right now to get a job done. And I think he's doing a freaking fantastic job, and I love it. Except for he needs to get my pardon done, by the way. But I think he's doing a great job. And I'm not trying to discount anything from Donald Trump. But I think we need to understand that it's our country that needs to be saved. And that is going to take all of us. It's not going to take one man. It's going to take millions and millions and millions and hundreds of millions of men and women to get that done. And until we dedicate ourselves to that, we're actually wasting our time. Because everybody thinks Donald Trump got back in office and we can rest and we can relax now. Everything's over. It's good. We're all safe and secure, right? Well, guess what? Just like I told you, the Oath Keepers disappeared and there was only 5 members left. Well, that's because they got comfortable. And then guess what happened? They started burning our cities down. Don't get comfortable just because Donald Trump's in office. We have to look at our country 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, and make sure not only are our children educated and knowledgeable about the history of our country. No, we really need to teach our kids history, and we need to make sure that they understand what our forefathers said. If you take your eye really off the ball and we set back and we relax a little bit, the corruption and all of this is going to come back in. And I think we've been given a foundation to build upon by Trump being elected. And if we let that slide and we let that go and we just think Trump's going to handle everything, we're doomed. We must continue to fight because this fight is one that never ends. We have the longest standing free country in the history of the world. And it is doomed to come to an end unless we stay vigilant in defending it. And most certainly from within, because that's where we are currently seeing the attack from. It's our own people that we've elected stealing from us, taking from us, corrupting our entire system. And that's what you need to pay attention to. And that's really the main thing I want to end this with.
Well, that's good shit. And I agree with everything you said. And, Kelly, you were not just a large man of stature, but you were also a pillar of inspiration inside the jail. And
How was I a pillar of inspiration?
He's this pillar like Herculean figure. It was always I just
never
wanted
knew how big I was until I got to prison. And then I was walking around in prison and I'm like, I am huge compared to these people.
Look at all these little people.
I know. I'm like, I am a massive man. I was like, damn, this is crazy. So,
like I said before, the Oath Keepers, I was always cool at you guys because I knew that you were legit. And I knew you guys were legit because you were one of the few people, weirdly, who actually worked on their cases and wanted to get out. And so, I always, I admire the dedication that y'all put into fighting your cases, just analyzing minute by minute of video, going through every line of accusations. The Oath Keepers were some of the most solid people we had in there. And whether it was that or whether it was you being on detail and having people's backs and stuff, I just want people to understand what a genuinely solid person you were, and that there were some questionable people in there, but I never had doubts about the fact that you were a patriot, and you loved your family. I knew that. You loved your brothers in there, and it's just, I'm glad that you're finally out, and I'm glad that we could go through this story. And I'm looking forward to part 2, where we get the gang back together and we go through Dunn, Lazarus, Meta, and all of that, because that is a story that needs to be told. I'm glad that Baker was able to dive into some of that. I can't wait to get all of you together so we can get as clear a picture of what an absolute shit show the Department of Justice put you guys through. And I'm glad you're out, and I'm glad you can finally tell your story, man.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, man. And, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. I know it's been a long one, but I hope it was informative. I know we rambled a little bit there, but I think we got to the point.
I think rambling is good, actually. And I'll say this, I'm glad we did it like this, and I like to do it like this, because when you guys were all still locked up, I tried to do my best to get some truth out there, but the truth is, like most mediums, they'll give you like 10 or 15 minutes to spit your facts, and it's never enough. So I like these long format ones. I don't care if you ramble. I don't care if you go on a tangent. I just want you to be able to talk, because you can never remember everything you need, and you can never say everything you need in such a short span. So that's what it's really all about. Unfiltered.
Yeah, and really, just to focus on my grandkids, that's the key right now. So I think we're turning the corner. I think we're getting back there, but that's something I want to focus on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.